Imagine you're walking home one night, keys in your pocket, lost in thought, when a figure steps out of the shadows. Same height, same voice, same face. You freeze not because they're a stranger, but because they aren't. They're you. Older, exhausted, desperate, and they say one thing: stop, please. Stop what you're about to do. You laugh, confused. Is this a prank? A psychotic break? A hallucination from too little sleep? But no, this version of you knows things no one else could. Childhood secrets, future scars, and a pain in their voice that makes your stomach twist. This isn't a game. This is real. Time travel paradox. Immediately your mind begins to spin. If this is truly you from the future, how are they even here? You remember enough sci-fi to know this shouldn't be possible. But then again, maybe it's not science, it's something deeper. Maybe time isn't a straight line. Maybe it loops. Maybe it bends to regret. They say you're on the edge of making a choice, one you'll never recover from. Not because it's illegal, not because it's immoral, but because it will unmake you. Transform who you are into something you can't recognize, can't forgive. Your future self is trembling. Their eyes dart like they've seen too much, and they plead again: stop. Don't take the job. Don't call that person. Don't betray yourself to save someone else. Whatever the specifics, the message is the same. There's no coming back from this. The self that breaks. We imagine the worst pain in life is what happens to us, but sometimes it's what we do to ourselves. There's a special kind of agony in watching your own reflection beg you not to become who they are, not because of external punishment, but internal corrosion. You don't become the villain overnight. You become them one compromise at a time. The lie you tell to keep your partner, the silence you choose to keep your job, the betrayal you justify because it's just once. You don't notice the decay until one day you wake up, look in the mirror, and see a version of yourself you swore you'd never be. That's the you standing in front of you now. That's the one who did everything right and lost themselves anyway. The illusion of choice. You ask them, "What did I do?" But they don't answer directly. They know how fragile this moment is. Too much information and you'll retreat into denial. Too little and you'll ignore the warning. So they speak in fragments. Emotions, not logic. You feel a sinking dread, because the truth is, deep down, you already know what they're talking about. You've been standing at this edge for weeks, maybe years, rationalizing, excusing, convincing yourself that it's fine, that it's necessary, that you're still a good person. But something in you never believed that. And now that part is standing here, flesh and blood, begging you to listen. The cost of not listening. What happens if you ignore them? They don't scream. They don't threaten. They just look defeated. Like they've seen it all before. Like they've stood on too many bridges, watched too many trains come, and pushed too many versions of themselves off without even realizing it. You think you're choosing safety. You think you're choosing progress. But you're choosing erasure, choosing the slow death of your own integrity. And the worst part, no one will notice. Not at first. You'll still smile. You'll still function. But something inside you will go silent. And that silence will echo. What you must sacrifice. To heed this warning, you will lose something. Maybe it's opportunity. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's the illusion of control. But that's the price. There's no avoiding it. The future you isn't here to make your life easier. They're here to make it honest. So you face a decision. Do you trust the stranger who feels like a mirror? Or do you go on pretending that you don't already know the answer? You asked for a sign. This is it. The future as mirror. We think of the future as something far away, but it's always closer than we realize. It's not built by fate or randomness. It's built by the quiet choices we make every day. What we tolerate, what we ignore, what we allow ourselves to become. You may never meet your future self again, but they've already left their mark in your dreams, in your fears, in that gnawing feeling you've been trying to drown. And now you know what that feeling really was. It was you, begging you to stop. You're in a quiet room, no distractions, no noises, just you and a tape recorder on the table. It clicks on by itself. The voice that begins to speak is yours, but what it says, you don't remember ever saying it. And yet, it's true, devastatingly true. The voice says something you've spent your whole life avoiding. It reveals the one thing you deny more fiercely than anything else. Maybe it says you're not really happy. Maybe it admits you never loved them. Or maybe it whispers that you don't actually believe in the things you pretend to defend. At first, you laugh, dismiss it. That's not me, you say. But the voice continues, steady, calm, undeniable. The cadence, the tone, the breath between words. It's unmistakably yours. And then comes the realization. You did say it. Maybe not out loud, maybe not to anyone else, but somewhere deep in the folds of your mind, you've always known. There's a secret truth sitting inside you like a splinter. You've built your entire identity around avoiding it. Crafted stories, habits, friendships, even love on top of a lie you never dared to examine. Now it's staring back at you in your own voice, and you feel yourself fracture. Self-deception. The mind is a masterful liar. It doesn't just deceive others, it deceives you. It protects you from pain by reshaping reality itself. Turns fears into preferences. Transforms regrets into stories of fate, converts cowardice into wisdom. You convince yourself you're principled when really you're just afraid. You say you're content when what you really feel is numb. You call it forgiveness, but it's resignation. You say you've moved on, but you're still frozen in time. Every day you participate in a psychological charade, and every reward you receive, comfort, praise, stability, reinforces that illusion. But what happens when the illusion breaks? What happens when you hear, in your own voice, the words you've buried so deep you forgot they were yours? The unspoken thought. There is always an unspoken thought behind your spoken one. When you say, I'm fine, maybe what you mean is I'm exhausted. When you say, I'm happy for you, maybe what you mean is why not me? And sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones you don't even hear yourself telling. You act with conviction, but feel hollow inside. You smile, but it trembles. You believe, but only because believing otherwise would tear your world apart. That's why the recording is so disturbing. Not because it's false, but because it's true in a way nothing else is. It bypasses your conscious defenses and hits something deeper. You remember now, that time you almost said it. That night you almost cried it out. The look in your own eyes the moment you turned away from it, just to keep going. Now it plays back with surgical precision, and all the masks fall off, confronting the mirror. There's a strange kind of violence in honesty, not the kind that wounds the body, but the kind that dismantles the self. Because to hear your hidden truth out loud is to watch the scaffolding of your personality collapse. The image you've curated of strength, of kindness, of certainty becomes tissue paper in a storm. You realize how much of your life is reaction, not choice. How many of your beliefs are borrowed. How much of your behavior is survival, not authenticity. But there's power in that collapse, because if the lie breaks, something real can begin. Not polished, not pretty, but real. The choice. The recording ends, silence returns, and you're left with a choice. you can reject it. Pretend it was manipulated, just a trick of the mind. You can shove the truth back into the dark and go on living the lie, or you can accept it. You can sit with the truth, no matter how painful, and ask what it wants from you, what life it's pointing toward, what changes it demands. Because here's the thing, the truth doesn't ruin you, the denial does. The truth, for all its agony, sets the stage for something unshakable. A life not built on performance, but presence. A self not crafted from fear, but chosen with clarity. You just have to be willing to hear yourself say the one thing you swore you never would. And then you have to say it again. This time on purpose. You're offered a choice, a perfect lie or a painful truth. No middle ground, no loopholes, just a binary decision that will shape the rest of your life. The perfect lie is seductive. It's flawless, seamless, and comforting. It tells you what you want to hear. It wraps itself around you like a warm blanket on a freezing night. In the lie, you're happy. The people you love are safe. The world is fair. Justice exists. You matter. You belong, and you believe it completely. That's part of the deal. The lie doesn't feel like a lie. It feels real. You'll never know it's false, never question it, never see the cracks beneath its surface. Your conscience sleeps. Your doubts disappear. You live a life of peace, purpose, and unshakable certainty. But that peace has a price, because the truth, the real truth, is waiting on the other side. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't reassure. It rips things apart. It exposes the rot. It tells you that the world is not fair, that justice is not guaranteed, that happiness is not a right, but a random accident of birth and biology, that people you admire are flawed, that the things you love are dying, that you, too, are not who you pretend to be. The truth hurts, not like a needle prick or a paper cut, but like an amputation, like being awake during your own surgery. You'll feel it in your bones. It will haunt you. It will whisper to you in quiet moments. It will keep you up at night. It won't let you rest. But here's the paradox. That pain, that torment, it's real. And because it's real, it's also honest, unfiltered, uncompromised. It's the only path to authenticity. You will lose your illusions, but you will find yourself. The truth doesn't offer comfort. It offers clarity. It strips you bare, but in doing so, it shows you what was underneath the entire time. It gives you the chance to rebuild, not with lies, but with reality. It gives you power, but only after it breaks you. Because this isn't theoretical. This is the decision you're already making. Every single day. Every time you tell yourself that you're okay, when you're not. Every time you justify a job you hate. Every time you scroll past suffering because it's too much to bear. Every time you bite your tongue instead of speaking what you know to be right. You're choosing. You already live in a compromise. A blurred line between truth and illusion. You think you can balance them. Just enough honesty to feel real. Just enough denial to stay sane. But that balance is a myth. And eventually, something will push you to one side. So imagine you wake up tomorrow and all the lies are gone. You see everything for what it is. Would you be able to live with that? Would you thank the truth for setting you free? Or would you beg for the lie to return? Now flip it. Imagine you're offered the perfect lie again. This time knowingly. Would you take it, knowing it would make you forget everything? Your pain, your guilt, your fear, all gone. But so is your truth. So is your identity. What's more valuable to you? Peace or truth? Because peace without truth is sedation. And truth without peace is madness. That's the cruel symmetry of the choice. The perfect lie will make you content, but not free. The painful truth will make you free, but never content. And most people take the lie, not because they're weak, but because they're human. Because the world is hard, because reality doesn't care if you're ready, and because suffering, even meaningful suffering, still hurts. But some choose differently. Some choose the pain. They choose the brutal, merciless truth, not because they like it, but because they need it. Because they can't stand the thought of living in someone else's script. Because they'd rather bleed in honesty than smile in fiction. And those people, they don't live easy lives, but they live real ones. So once more, you're standing at the threshold. 2 doors. One leads to a beautiful dream that will last forever. The other leads to an unrelenting reality you'll never escape. Do you open your eyes or keep them closed? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you've been selected for a strange, unskippable experiment. You're placed in a quiet, dark room. A screen flickers to life in front of you. What plays isn't fiction. It's your life, your exact life, but not the one you lived. It's the one you could have lived, the one you missed. This version of you is confident, calm, and curious. They made the choices you didn't. They took the risk you were too scared to take. They said yes when you said no. And now you're forced to watch them live the life you secretly always wanted, and you can't look away. This isn't just punishment, it's psychological torture disguised as revelation. Every scene reopens a wound. Every success is a reminder of your failure. You watch a version of yourself fall in love with someone you never had the courage to approach. You watch them take the job you thought was too ambitious. You see them smile in ways you haven't in years. And worst of all, they look happy. Authentically, unapologetically happy. You start to remember every small decision you justified as practical. Every sacrifice you labeled as mature. All those compromises you made, too small to notice in the moment, accumulated into a life that no longer feels like yours. And now you're stuck, watching a self you abandoned long ago. The room is silent, but the shame is deafening, because deep down you know the truth. This other life wasn't stolen from you. It wasn't denied. You just never fought for it. You realize now that most regret doesn't come from failure. It comes from inaction, from the cowardice dressed as caution, from the moments you let fear speak louder than desire. You thought you were being reasonable, responsible, but what you really were was afraid. Afraid of judgment, afraid of risk, afraid of standing out. So you blended in, hoping comfort would be enough. But it wasn't. It never was. And now you're paying the price. Not with pain, but with perspective. That's what makes this so unbearable. You're not watching a fantasy. You're watching asterisk. You asterisk, stripped of excuses. You're forced to reckon with the version of yourself that believed in something bigger, something better. The version that saw fear as fuel, not a warning sign. The version that didn't let safety become a prison. It's not envy you feel, it's grief. Grief for a life unlived, for a self unchosen. And there's no turning away. You start to wonder, what if this screen doesn't shut off? What if this is forever? A permanent mirror reflecting everything you could have been, had you only dared to try. The cruelty of this thought experiment isn't in its fiction, it's in its accuracy. Because for many people, this is already real. They don't need a screen. Their regrets play on loop every time they're alone, every time they see someone else living boldly, freely, every time they say, I could have, but didn't. They feel the sting, not of failure, but of silence. The life not lived screams louder than any mistake ever could. And it begs the question, If you're watching this now, if you see what you've missed, what will you do when the screen turns off? Will you return to the same path, the same numb routine? Or will you let this vision haunt you enough to change, not just in theory, but in action? Because there's still time, not for the life you just saw, but for the one you have now. The next version of yourself is already waiting. And maybe one day, it'll be the version someone else is forced to watch in awe, wondering how you had the courage to become it. But only if you start, right now, while you still can. You're walking down a quiet street. The sky is heavy, the wind is still, and everything feels just slightly wrong. Not wrong in any way you can describe, but wrong in the way that makes your stomach tighten. In the way that makes you doubt your own senses. You're not dreaming, you know that. But no one else seems to believe you. Now imagine this. You wake up tomorrow and something has changed. You can only tell the truth. Not out of principle, but by some unbreakable force. You open your mouth and out it comes, raw, unfiltered truth. You try to lie, to soften the edges, but you physically can't. Every word is a reflection of what you actually know, feel, or perceive. At first it feels like a gift. Then it becomes a curse. You try telling your friends that you're deeply unhappy. They laugh it off. Oh, you're just being dramatic. You tell your boss the project is doomed and the data is manipulated. They accuse you of being negative, insubordinate. You tell your partner you feel distant, that something's off. They tell you you're overthinking it. You keep telling the truth and it keeps getting you punished. You're honest and you're isolated because most people don't want truth. They want comfort, validation, reassurance. The truth is messy. It's inconvenient. It forces confrontation. It doesn't care about your social standing, your polished narrative, your carefully managed persona. The truth is a wrecking ball, and you are now the ones swinging it. You start to notice how often the world rewards performance, not sincerity, not insight, just the ability to play along. You watch as people who lie strategically, rise faster, get praised more, fit in better. You begin to realize something deeply unsettling. Truth isn't just undervalued, it's actively rejected. People don't want to see reality. They want a curated illusion, one that flatters their choices, protects their beliefs, and spares them from guilt. And when you speak the truth, you shatter that illusion. And they don't thank you for it. They resent you. You try to warn them about the corruption, the manipulation, the lies hidden in plain sight. But instead of listening, they turn on you. They call you paranoid, cynical, toxic. You're the villain now, not because you're wrong, but because you refuse to lie. And here's the paradox. The more truthful you become, the more you look insane. Truth sounds like madness in a world addicted to lies. The worst part, you start to doubt yourself. Because when no one believes you, not even the people closest to you, it erodes something essential inside. You begin questioning your own perceptions. You replay every conversation. You wonder if you're the problem. If maybe somehow you've lost touch with reality. But you haven't. You're just the only one still looking at it. You begin to understand why people lie, to themselves, to others. It's not always selfishness. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the only way to keep a job, a relationship, a sense of community. Lies lubricate the machinery of everyday life. But now you're the sand in the gears, and you can't stop. You stand in a room full of smiling people, and you feel like you're screaming in a soundproof box. You know things they don't. Or maybe they do, but they've buried them so deep, they no longer recognize the truth when it's standing right in front of them. It's not just that they don't believe you, it's that they can't. Because belief is a choice. And choosing to believe the truth means giving up the lie. It means admitting the world isn't what they thought it was, that they aren't who they thought they were. And that kind of reckoning, most people would rather burn than face it. So they burn you instead. And still, you keep telling the truth. Not because it makes you noble, not because it makes you strong, but because, deep down, you know that being believed is not the same as being right. And sometimes the truth is a solitary road. Sherdba, it's the only one that leads anywhere real. You wake up one day and feel something strange, not fear, not confusion. A subtle dislocation, like your life is a movie you've seen before, only now you're aware you're acting in it. And not just acting, role-playing. You say the right things, smile at the right moments, laugh when you're supposed to, frown when required, agree, apologize, nod, but every gesture feels like it's been rehearsed, scripted. And here's the uncomfortable part. You can't remember when it started. Was it when you learned which version of yourself got approval? When you realized certain emotions were inconvenient, certain thoughts better left unsaid? When success meant performance, not authenticity? You're not being fake. That's too simple. You're being you. Only not really. You're being the version of yourself the world rewards. The socially adjusted version. The agreeable, productive, inoffensive version. The composite of expectations. An echo of other people's comfort, and you didn't even notice the costume slipping on. At first, it's subtle. You laugh at a joke you don't find funny. Pretend to care about small talk. Adjust your opinions based on the room you're in. It feels harmless, strategic, even. But slowly, imperceptibly, it grows. Soon you're censoring thoughts before they fully form. You don't cry when you're sad. You smile and say you're tired. You don't say what you want. You say what's expected. You don't live. You perform. And the performance gets applause. You get promotions, compliments, invitations, likes, smiles of approval from people who don't really know you. Because you don't really know you either. You've become a character so believable. Even you forgot it's an act. But something's off. In quiet moments, a dull ache presses at your chest. A kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. A distance between your body and your soul, like your real self, is trapped behind a two-way mirror, watching powerless as the actor takes the stage. And here's where it gets darker. The longer you play this role, the harder it is to stop. Because the rewards don't just come, they accumulate. Your job, your relationships, your entire life gets built around the persona. To stop playing means risking it all, and so you keep going. Even when the mask starts to feel heavier, even when your laughter turns hollow, even when your reflection feels like a stranger's. You keep going because you've forgotten what authenticity feels like. You've confused performance with identity. But what if you stopped? Not everything. Not recklessly, just started pulling at the seams. Said what you actually felt. Admitted what you really wanted. Let silence exist without filling it. Allowed yourself to be disliked. Would the world collapse? Or would it shift, violently? Yes, but into something real. The fear is that without the act, you'll lose everything. The truth is, without dropping it, you already have. You haven't been living a life. You've been maintaining a character who's loved, respected, admired, but who isn't you. You can't even remember what it feels like to speak without editing yourself first, to want something without apologizing for it, to exist without managing perception. So here's the question. Who are you when nobody's watching? When no one's reacting, validating, judging? Who remains? If the answer terrifies you, that's where you begin. You're not broken, you're just buried. Under layers of approval, under years of rehearsal, under all the things you thought you had to be to survive. But surviving isn't living, and being palatable isn't being free. Freedom comes with risk, with rejection, with being seen, really seen, and still choosing to stay honest. That's the scariest part. But also the only way back to yourself. Because until you stop role-playing, you'll never know if the world could love the real you, or only the mask. And isn't it worth finding out? Imagine being trapped in a loop. Not just any loop, but the worst day of your life. Over and over again. Every mistake, every scream, every unbearable moment. It replays with merciless precision. You wake up, and there it is again. The same pain, the same panic, the same regret. At first, you try to fight it. You scream, you run, you plead for it to stop. But it doesn't, it won't. Because this loop isn't a punishment. It's a demand. This is the concept behind a disturbing thought experiment. You must relive the worst day of your life until you understand it. Not just the surface-level pain or the obvious consequences, but everything, every layer, every choice, every hidden mechanism that brought you there. Memory is a liar. It edits. It softens the edges or sharpens them, depending on what we need to survive. But this loop has no patience for lies. It drags you back to the raw, unfiltered truth. The exact look on their face. The words you can't take back. The silence that lasted too long. It doesn't allow reinterpretation, only confrontation. And here's the twist. The loop doesn't end just because you feel sorry. Regret isn't enough. Guilt is irrelevant. You must understand. That's the only key. But what does that mean? Understanding isn't just cognitive. It's existential. You have to grasp how every small decision led there, how your fear disguised itself as logic, how your ego whispered lies, dressed as reason, how you ignored the warnings because the truth was too heavy to carry. You have to see the invisible strings, cause and effect, habit and impulse, all tangled into a knot you helped tie. You might think you're the victim in this memory. Maybe you were. But the loop doesn't care about your role. Only your awareness. It forces you to view the scene from every angle. The person who hurt you, the one you failed, the bystander who walked away. It forces you to ask impossible questions. What did they feel? What did they need? What did you ignore? There is no closure here without comprehension. No end without insight. And the longer you resist, the deeper the loop digs. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a model of how trauma works. Because in a sense, many of us are already reliving our worst days. Not literally, but psychologically. We recreate patterns, sabotage our progress, attract familiar pain, not because we're cursed, but because something remains unresolved, unseen, unmetabolized. Your brain, despite all its sophistication, is a survival machine. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about function. If understanding a trauma threatens your identity, it will bury it. If remembering honestly risks your narrative, it will distort it. But this loop, this thought experiment, it demands truth, even if it dismantles everything you think you are. And here's the darkest part. The more you resist understanding, the more real the loop becomes. You lose sense of time. You begin to forget who you were before that day. The memory expands, consumes, metastasizes, until all you are is the trauma, the ghost of that moment. But understanding, real understanding, that's resurrection. Not a return to who you were, but a transformation into someone new. Someone who sees the world with terrifying clarity, who can name their ghosts, who no longer mistakes their past for their prison. This is the terrifying gift of the loop. It destroys who you pretend to be until all that's left is who you Actually asterisk. Ah. And if you survive that, you're free. Not just from the memory, but from the illusion that you were ever separate from it. So the question becomes, if you were forced to relive your worst day until you understood it, how long would it take? And more disturbingly, what if it's already happening? You wake up. The room looks familiar, but not quite right. The coffee tastes a little more bitter than you remember. The mirror warps your face just slightly. A text message from a friend says something they'd never say. You shake it off, must be nothing. But tomorrow it happens again. Slightly different. A little more off. This is not déjà vu. This is reality arguing with you. Quietly, subtly, persistently. Because every day, without your consent, the world rewrites itself just enough to contradict you. Imagine a universe where nothing is fixed, where meaning, perception, and memory shift like sand. That's not science fiction. That's your actual life. You think your beliefs are yours. You think your memories are sacred. But what if every interaction you have, every ad, every comment, every silence is gently steering you away from your own mind? Because that's exactly what's happening. You wake up each day in a world that slightly disagrees with you, and the disagreement is so small, so subtle, that you rarely notice it. But it builds like a slow leak in your foundation, until one day your mind isn't your own anymore. This isn't just influence, it's erosion. Language is one of its sharpest tools. You say freedom, the world replies safety. You say truth, the world offers optics. You say, I know who I am. The world whispers. Are you sure? It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It just corrects you, gently, pervasively, endlessly. This is not a glitch. It's a mechanism. Our environments are engineered for frictionless contradiction. Every algorithm you interact with is designed to reinforce certain ideas and suppress others, not based on truth, but based on engagement, based on profit, based on power. So when you think the world is agreeing with you, it's not. It's agreeing with a version of you it wants to shape. And when you disagree with that version, when something doesn't feel right, it doesn't punish you. It simply nudges you back in line. Ever notice how hard it is to have a truly original thought? How uncomfortable it feels to challenge your own assumptions? That's not weakness. That's programming. You're being rewritten, bit by bit, belief by belief. Think about your memories, not the big ones, the little ones. The color of your childhood bedroom, the sound of your mother's voice, the exact words your best friend once said. That changed everything. How confident are you, really? Because the mind isn't a camera, it's a storyteller. And every day, that story gets edited by emotions, by expectations, by external cues you don't even realize you're absorbing. You are not the author of your life, not entirely. You're a co-writer, at best. And the other hand on the pen belongs to a world that doesn't see you clearly. And yet, you trust it. You trust the feedback loop. You trust the likes, the affirmations, the algorithms, the friends who never really challenge you. You trust the silence that follows when you speak something unpopular. You take it as truth. But maybe it's not silence. Maybe it's censorship. You wake up in a reality that disagrees with your instincts and punishes your divergence with confusion, with doubt, with loneliness. That's the real cost. Not just your beliefs, but your clarity. The ability to know what's real, what matters, what's yours, and the scariest part. The world never tells you it's doing this. It just keeps showing you a slightly different mirror each day until you forget what your own reflection used to look like. That's how it wins. Not with force, with friction, not by stopping you, but by endlessly redirecting you. You don't need to be locked in a cage to be imprisoned. You just need to live in a world that softly, persistently convinces you that your thoughts aren't quite right. And so you adapt, you shift, you compromise, until one day you wake up and nothing disagrees with you anymore. And you realize it's not because the world changed, it's because you did. You're standing in a hallway you've never seen before. The air is still, the walls pulse faintly with a hum you can feel in your chest. You don't know how you got here, but something tells you you've been expected. At the end of the hall is a door, not just any door. It's ancient, impossibly out of place, and more than anything, it feels familiar. There's no label, no key. But the moment your hand touches the handle, you know what's behind it, a version of you who left. Left what? Everything. This life, this identity, this particular path you've been carving with every mundane choice and quiet compromise. The door creaks open. Inside, you find yourself, or rather, who you could have been if you'd walked away, not just from your job, not just from your city, from everything that made you you, your routines, your roles, your reputation. This version of you didn't just escape, they vanished. And yet, they don't look broken. They look calm, clear, like someone who isn't haunted by the tension between the life they live and the one they secretly dream of. You feel it instantly, the dissonance. The you who stayed and the you who fled, a collision of realities that was never supposed to happen. You want to speak, but words fail, because deep down you already know what they'll say. They left the moment they realized their life wasn't really theirs, not entirely. They saw how each decision they made was shaped by others, by expectations, by guilt, by fear, masquerading as responsibility. They stopped mistaking survival for fulfillment, stopped telling themselves they were happy just because they weren't in pain. They walked away from the version of life that rewarded their obedience and drained their soul. And now here you are, looking at the ghost of your unlived life. Would you go with them? Could you? The answer isn't simple, because what's at stake isn't just freedom, it's identity. Every piece of your life today is a thread in a tapestry that feels too tangled to unravel. Your friends, your job, your beliefs, your reputation, each one built on top of the last, like layers of sediment compacted over time. To leave would mean to dismantle it all, to accept the possibility that none of it was ever truly you, that maybe it was a role you were performing so well, you forgot it was a performance. And yet, as this other you looks at you, you don't see judgment. You see mourning. They grieve the people you still love, the dreams you kept alive out of duty, the lies you told yourself to keep going, because they remember it too. That weight, that ache, that silence between the lines of a perfectly acceptable life. You realize something terrifying. The only difference between you and them was a moment. One moment of clarity. One act of rebellion. One decision not to return. That's all it takes to fracture the self. To redraw your entire existence around a new axis. And here's the twist. You've already opened the door. You've already seen what's possible. Which means you can never go back to not knowing. This door doesn't offer answers. It offers a question. Will you be the version of yourself who stayed, or the one who finally left? Imagine waking up in a house you don't recognize. The walls are covered with photos. Your childhood, your family, your life. Your name is written on mail, carved into birthday cakes, stitched onto your old school uniform. Everything screams you. But something feels off. There are no mirrors, no reflections. You pick up a photograph and stare at the smiling face. It's yours. But deep down you know something no one else does. You've never lived a single moment of that life. This isn't a memory lapse. It's not amnesia. It's something far more disturbing. You didn't forget your past. You never had one. Because you're not a person at all. You're a memory, an echo, the residue of someone who died. Let that sink in. You are the aftermath. You think, you feel. You remember birthdays, heartbreaks, favorite songs, but none of them are yours. They belonged to someone who no longer exists. You are their shadow, animated by memory alone. And the worst part, you still believe you're real. But what does real even mean? Memories are supposed to belong to someone. They're supposed to be attached to flesh, to continuity, to time. You have none of that. You are suspended, like a photograph trying to become a person. You walk and talk and feel like the person you remember being, but you're not them. You're the leftover thoughts, clinging to form, trying to matter. And it's not just eerie, it's existentially devastating. Because if you're just the memory of someone who died, then your feelings, your sadness, your joy, your fear, they're all borrowed. Echoes of emotions felt long ago by someone else. You're living a rerun of a show that ended, trying to improvise your own lines in a script already finished. So ask yourself, who are you trying to be? What do you do when you realize your entire sense of self is an impersonation? That every decision you make is filtered through a personality that isn't yours but inherited, like a voice on a tape recorder insisting it's still alive. Even your pain isn't yours. It belonged to someone who lived and suffered and died. And now, somehow, you're caught in the residue, trying to heal a wound that isn't even yours to begin with. A ghost performing therapy on itself. But here's the question that breaks you. If a memory is vivid enough, does it matter that the person is gone? If you feel love, truly feel it. But it was someone else's love, first. Is it still real? Or are you just mimicking what it meant to be human? What if the only difference between life and memory is persistence? Maybe that's all you are now. Persistence. The stubborn continuation of someone who refused to be forgotten. A consciousness made of reminiscence, clawing at the walls of time to stay intact. You weren't supposed to wake up. You were supposed to fade, to dissolve with the decay of the brain that once held you. But here you are, walking, talking, feeling, a glitch in mortality, a haunting that learned how to speak. And still, the illusion holds. People talk to you. They believe you're real. You hold jobs. Tell stories, build relationships. No one suspects that every answer you give is drawn from a past you never lived. You're not lying, you're remembering. But here's the final horror. Maybe that's all any of us are. Maybe every person is just a memory playing itself out. Cells recycling thoughts, neurons echoing what came before. Maybe there is no core self, no solid I. Just patterns, scripts, habits masquerading as personality. So maybe you're not the only one. Maybe we're all just flickering films of who we once were, clinging to the illusion of continuity, hoping no one notices the cracks. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. You're sitting alone in a coffee shop when it happens. A man you've never seen before slides into the seat across from you. No greeting, no smile, just one sentence, spoken in a quiet, razor-sharp voice. You regret not telling your mother the truth before she died. Your heart stutters. He doesn't blink, doesn't explain. Just stares at you with calm, surgical precision, like he's dissecting your soul with his eyes. And somehow he's right. He's not guessing. He's asterisk knows asterisk. You try to laugh it off. Shrug. That's a pretty specific icebreaker. But then he continues. You regret the job you turned down in 2014. You told yourself it wasn't the right time, but really you were just scared. A chill creeps up your spine. The room suddenly feels too bright, too loud. He lists them, one after another, not memories, regrets. The precise kind you bury so deep you forget they're still bleeding inside you. You want to run. But where do you go when the past walks up and finds you first? This isn't about guilt. This is about exposure. Most of your regrets hide behind excuses. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know better. I didn't have a choice. These are the shields you build to survive the unbearable weight of what might have been. Regret isn't just memory. It's memory laced with the poison of possibility. And now this stranger is peeling back your defenses with surgical efficiency. You regret the abortion, he says. Voice gentle now, almost kind. Not because you think it was wrong, but because you never told anyone. You carried that silence like a coffin. You want to scream. How does he know? But you already know the answer. Because you radiate, regret. It lives in your posture, your choices, the way you flinch at certain songs, pause before answering innocent questions. You are a walking manuscript of things left unsaid. The stranger isn't magic, he's clarity, a mirror with perfect recall. And here's the terrifying part. Imagine if everyone had one. A stranger who followed them through life, speaking aloud the regrets they pretend don't matter. The affair they almost had, the friendship they destroyed, the time they stayed silent when someone needed them to speak. Now imagine if that stranger was you . Not now, but 20 years from now, wrinkled, weary, disappointed. You lock eyes with your future self, and all they ask is, why didn't you choose differently? Regret is the echo of a decision you refuse to face. It isn't passive, it hunts you, silently, patiently. And when it finally catches up, it doesn't shout, it whispers. That's why this stranger hurts more than any enemy. Because he doesn't tell you who you were, he tells you who you could have been. Every regret is a ghost version of yourself. A version that said yes instead of no. That walked away instead of staying. That told the truth when it mattered most. But the real horror isn't what he knows, it's what he doesn't say. Because for every regret he names, you realize there are 10 he hasn't. 10 darker, sharper, more painful memories still buried under layers of denial. And he's waiting, just sitting there, smiling, waiting for you to remember them yourself. And suddenly, you understand, the stranger isn't a stranger at all. He's your conscience, given shape, given voice, given eyes that never blink. And once you've met him, you can never unsee him. From this moment forward, every time you lie to yourself, every time you silence that quiet voice begging you to act, he'll be there, watching, waiting, ready to remind you that no matter how hard you try, regret always finds a way back. Because you don't forget your regrets. They remember you. You wake up in a white room. It's silent, too silent. There are no doors, no windows, just a chair. And sitting across from you is someone who looks exactly like you. Same clothes, same scar on the eyebrow, same tired eyes. And they tell you something that fractures your sense of reality. You've lived this life thousands of times, over and over. The same choices, the same regrets, and every time you choose to forget. What do you do with that? At first you laugh. It sounds like a bad movie plot, a paranoid fantasy. But they go on. They start listing things, your secrets, your dreams, the one memory you swore you'd never tell anyone. Details no stranger could know. And as the certainty builds, the floor beneath your reality starts to crack. Because if they're right, you're not living for the first time. You're looping. And you've chosen this. But why? Let's start with the illusion of free will. We like to believe we're in control, that each decision we make is spontaneous, authentic, untainted. But what if they aren't? What if they're scripts, coded responses, rehearsed lines, delivered on a stage you don't remember building? In this theory, your life is like a song stuck on repeat. You're the musician and the audience. You forget you've played this track before because remembering would ruin the illusion of freedom. But sometimes, just sometimes, a note hits wrong, a déjà vu, a gut feeling, a deep, irrational fear that you've done this all before. Because maybe you have. Now imagine this, you're told that you've had the chance to make different choices. That in some versions of your life, you chased your dream. In others, you let love go. In some, you died early. In others, you lived too long. You've done it all. You've felt it all. And still, here you are. The only constant is your refusal to remember. Why? Because remembering is unbearable. Remembering means facing the unbearable weight of regret. The people you hurt. The paths you abandoned. The betrayals, the failures, the moments that still echo in your chest. Memory would collapse you under its weight. So you made a pact with yourself, with something beyond you, to forget. Each time you return, you beg to forget. You crave the illusion of newness, the intoxicating lie of the first time. But the truth is, there are no firsts left. Only reruns, only edits of a story you refuse to stop telling. But here's the twist. Every loop changes, you not in obvious ways. You still drink the same coffee, argue over the same nonsense, cry at the same heartbreak. But something deeper shifts. A restlessness builds, a haunting. You feel like a character trying to escape a book, clawing at the edges of the page. Because what you're really chasing isn't happiness. It's freedom from the script, from the cycle, from yourself. You might ask, if I've lived this life thousands of times, where are the signs? They're everywhere. In dreams where you die, but feel peace instead of fear. In moments where time slows, and you swear you've seen this exact face, this exact sky, this exact sentence before. In the people you meet and feel you've known forever. Not metaphors, memories. There's a name for this. Eternal return. The idea that everything you've done, you will do again, forever. Not once, not twice, but an infinite number of times. Some see this as punishment, others as perfection. But for you, it's a trap, because now you know, and knowing makes forgetting harder. The mirror version of you leans in close. Their eyes are tired, but kind. You can break the loop, they whisper, but not by doing something different, by becoming someone different, not by changing the script, by burning the stage. That means confronting the truth you've always run from. The life you're living isn't random, it's chosen by you. Every comfort, every failure, every act of self-betrayal. You didn't just stumble into this existence, you built it over and over, because it's safe, because it's familiar, because it hurts just enough to feel real, but not enough to wake you up. But now you're awake, and you have to ask the only question that matters. If you've lived this life 1,000 times, why are you still choosing it? And what happens if you don't? You wake up, and everyone knows a version of you that you don't. At first, it feels like a dream. The room looks familiar, your body moves as expected, but something's off, subtly wrong. You check your phone, and the notifications flood in. Friends, family, co-workers, all acting like they know something you don't. Congratulating you on things you never did. Apologizing for things you don't remember. Accusing you of words you never said, and every single one of them is certain. Certain that their version of you is the real one. You start to feel like a ghost haunting your own life. You ask your best friend what's going on. She looks hurt. "Stop pretending," she says. "You told me this would happen. You said you'd deny everything." Her eyes fill with betrayal. "You didn't earn." Her voice shakes with emotion. "You don't understand." And suddenly, you're not sure what's worse, that everyone thinks you've changed, or that maybe, just maybe, you did. This is not a glitch in the matrix. This is a psychological trap, a full-on collapse of identity. Because what are you really, if not the memory of your actions? What remains of you when the people around you all agree on a version of your life that you can't remember living? You try to explain. You insist you're not who they think you are. But every denial sounds like an excuse. Every attempt at clarity makes you seem more manipulative, more unstable. They have evidence. Screenshots, voice memos, videos. A version of you looking back through the screen with your face, your voice, but none of your mind, none of your choices. You stare at your own eyes and feel nothing. No recognition, no anchor. This is where the fracture begins. The split between the dirty you remember and the you, they insist, is real. And this split isn't just uncomfortable, it's existentially dangerous. Because identity is not just built internally, it's co-authored. It lives in the minds of others. You can claim your truth, but if the world rewrites your past, who wins? We like to believe that memory is the ultimate witness, that deep down, we'd know who we are. But memory is fragile. It can be gaslit, manipulated, overwritten. And when every external voice becomes an echo chamber, reinforcing a story that isn't yours, your own memories start to feel suspicious, weak, flawed. And then the questions begin, not from others. Those came first. These are internal. What if I did do those things? What if I blocked it out? What if this amnesia is a defense mechanism? You don't just lose your past, you lose your confidence in your own reality. And here's the cruel twist. Once people believe a version of you, it becomes almost impossible to dislodge. Their emotions fossilize around that narrative. You become a character in their story, one they refuse to rewrite. To them, changing their mind would be a betrayal of their own experience, their own pain. It would mean admitting they were wrong, and very few people ever choose that kind of discomfort. So they double down. Your partner insists you lied. Your parents say you're not acting like yourself. Co-workers whisper that you've become unstable. Every conversation becomes a courtroom where you're on trial for a life you don't remember living. And then comes the isolation, the quiet, creeping loneliness of being surrounded by people who speak your name but mean someone else entirely. You retreat. At first emotionally, then physically. Not out of guilt, but out of exhaustion. You start to wonder if silence is safer than explanation. You stop correcting people. You let the false stories play out, because fighting every misremembered sentence, every altered fact, every sideways glance is a battle you cannot win. Eventually, you begin to adapt. Not because you accept their version of you, but because it's the only version anyone will allow you to inhabit. You become a ghost with skin, a shell of remembered instincts walking through a maze of rewritten history. And here's the real terror. What if their version starts to overwrite yours? What if the repetition of the lie becomes louder than the whisper of truth? What if memory, that fragile compass, finally breaks, and you begin to believe the story they've told about you? That's the final prison. Not that others see you wrongly, but that you start to see yourself through their eyes, and in that moment the question flips. It's no longer, who am I? But who was I? And who decides? You wake up again and realize the real horror isn't being misunderstood. It's being overwritten. You wake up in a white room. There are no windows, no doors, no clocks, no exit. Just a pen and a blank sheet of paper resting on a metal table. Then a voice, disembodied yet undeniably familiar, echoes through your mind. Write your ending. But you don't remember the beginning. You don't even know the plot. You don't know who you are, how you got here, or what the story is even about. Still, the voice insists. You wrote the beginning, you just forgot. This isn't a test, it's a reminder, and that's when the truth begins to itch under your skin. Because what if this white room isn't a prison? What if it's the final page, and you staring at the paper are the author of a story you once knew by heart? But the ending slipped away. Reality doesn't just happen to you. It unfolds from you. And the terrifying part isn't that someone else is in control. The terrifying part is that you are. But you've been asleep at the wheel. Imagine this: everything you've ever believed about yourself, about the world, about what's possible wasn't inherited. It was written, chosen, selected from infinite options. But now you live inside those choices as if they're permanent, immutable, as if the ink can't be moved, as if the story can't be rewritten. You forgot you had the pen, you accepted the edits. You called the first draft truth and then discarded the rest. And somewhere along the way, you stopped writing. Now ask yourself, who benefits when you forget you're the author? Who gains when you mistake someone else's narrative for your own? Because you weren't born into reality. You were born into a story already in motion. A story about limitations, about obedience, about how things are and how they'll always be. But what if how things are is just the midpoint of a script you abandoned halfway through? What if the real horror isn't being trapped inside someone else's reality, but forgetting it was always yours to shape? Think of the roles you've played: the obedient student, the tireless worker, the silent citizen. You accepted these roles not because they were right, but because they were written for you. Then you memorized the lines, and now you perform them, day after day, without remembering that you were once the playwright. Every routine you follow, every belief you defend, every identity you clutch desperately in the dark. They're not truths, they're pages. The pages, and you're stuck on a chapter that no longer fits who you are. But here's the uncomfortable twist. Maybe it never did. Maybe you've always felt the edges fray, the dialogue sour, the plot twist that never quite arrived, because you were never supposed to be a character. You were supposed to be the author. But the world is loud, and repetition is seductive. So you forgot the ending. You forgot there was supposed to be one. You forgot that stories only become real when you stop questioning them. But now you're starting to remember. You remember the feeling of possibility before it calcified into fate. You remember dreaming of futures that didn't come with pre-written consequences. You remember what it was like to imagine. And now the paper waits, blank, untouched, begging for one final paragraph. But here's the paradox. The ending has already been written. It's hidden in every moment you ignored, every choice you deferred, every truth you were too afraid to write down. It's in your silence, your hesitation, your fear of taking the pen and writing something that breaks the script completely. Because if you write a new ending, you'll have to confront everything that came before. You'll have to admit the story wasn't yours for a very long time. But maybe, just maybe, it still can be. The page is waiting. The voice has gone quiet, and the only thing left now is your hand. What if you could live inside a single moment forever? Not relive it once. Not rewind it, replay it, and move on. But actually stay inside it. Feel the warmth of that sunlight, hear that laughter, hold that hand, over and over, unending. Sounds like a gift. Until you realize the moment never changes. You can never change it. But first, it feels like paradise. A perfect memory, frozen in amber, the love you once had, the happiest day of your life. A victory, a touch, a sigh. Every time it loops, your heart swells just like it did back then. Your breath catches, you smile. You believe you've escaped time's cruelty, escaped regret. But the loop doesn't care about you. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't listen. It's not your memory. It's a machine, precise, relentless, repetitive. Soon, the cracks begin to show. That tear in their eye you never noticed before. That small mistake in your words. That smile you once found comforting, now slightly off. You start to pick it apart, obsessively, because you have nothing else to do but watch and think and realize what you do differently. If only you could, but you can't. You start to scream, but the moment doesn't hear you. You plead silently for variation, for a single shift in tone or motion. But the moment is deaf, frozen, absolute. That's when the horror begins, because you're no longer reliving a memory. You're trapped inside it. And now you notice what you missed the first time. The subtle tension in your jaw, the flicker of doubt in your eyes, the words you chose not to say. You begin to wonder, was this ever really the best moment? Or was it simply the one you idealized? This is the trap of perfection. It seduces you with comfort, then suffocates you with its refusal to change. You try to resist, to imagine a different version. You speak louder, move faster, try to push against the script, but it holds. The smile still fades at the same second. The silence still lingers in the same painful way. The moment owns you now. It's become a mirror you can't look away from, a reflection of who you were, not who you are. That's the paradox. To live forever inside a moment is to die slowly by repetition. Memory becomes a cage. Nostalgia becomes a punishment. You thought you were choosing joy, but what you chose was stillness. And stillness isn't peace, it's decay. Time moves because we need it to, because we can't grow inside a vacuum, because we learn through change, through pain, through movement. But in the loop, nothing changes. There is no pain, but also no growth, no new love, no forgiveness, no closure, just echoes. Eventually, you begin to forget what came before. You can't recall what happened after this moment, or before. Your past collapses into this single loop, and your future. It doesn't exist, not really. You traded it for the illusion of permanence. And here's the real twist. Even if you begged to leave, even if you offered anything for a second chance, a new day, a blank slate, you couldn't. Because to escape, you'd have to change something. And that's the one thing this moment will never allow. So you smile again. You laugh again. You feel the joy again. But now, beneath the surface, something else blooms. A hollow ache. A desperate hunger for chaos, for surprise, even for pain. Anything but this. Perfection becomes prison when stripped of possibility. So next time you long to freeze time, ask yourself this: are you seeking a moment, or are you running from what comes next? Because eternity isn't measured in minutes. It's measured in stagnation. And no matter how sweet the memory, it cannot sustain you, not forever. You wanted to relive it, but you were never prepared for what that truly meant. You wanted to stay, but now you see the power to relive is also the curse of never moving forward, and there's no way out, because the moment is perfect, but you are not. And that difference, that dissonance, will eat you alive. Imagine this. You're standing in a grocery store. You choose to buy one product over another. Maybe it's cheaper. Maybe it's just convenient. But somewhere, someone else pays for that decision. A farmer, underpaid. A factory worker, overworked, a competitor out of business, a stranger suffering quietly while your life moves forward untouched. We like to think our choices are isolated, personal, but every decision, no matter how small, ripples outward. Each preference, each convenience, each moment of inaction forms a chain reaction. And somewhere down that chain, someone hurts. You order fast food and you never see the underpaid teenager working back-to-back shifts. You buy a fast fashion shirt and you don't hear the hum of the sweatshop or the cries of exhausted hands stitching through the night. You invest in a stock and you never meet the family evicted when that company needed to cut costs. The suffering is always invisible, and that's the trick. Because invisibility creates comfort, and comfort creates distance. The more removed you are, the easier it becomes to rationalize. You didn't mean harm, you didn't see harm, you didn't cause harm, but you did. Ethics at a distance is painless. Morality in the abstract is easy. You can donate when it feels good. Protest when it feels safe. But true moral weight doesn't lie in what you believe. It lies in what you choose, in every mundane, daily action that shapes someone else's reality. You walk past a homeless man and feel a flicker of guilt. You don't stop, not because you don't care, but because you feel helpless. Or maybe you're late, or maybe you've told yourself a story about him that absolves you. Addiction, laziness, bad luck. A story that makes your inaction easier to bear, but that flicker of guilt, that's truth trying to speak. That's the scream you've muted. We often think of suffering as distant, dramatic, far removed from our lives, but it isn't. It's woven into our comforts, our wealth, our stability, our safety. They're built on layers of decisions made at someone else's expense. Someone works so you can rest. Someone loses so you can win. Someone suffers so you don't have to. And here's the paradox: you can't stop it. Not entirely. You live in a system too vast, too entangled, too optimized for convenience. But you can see it. You can recognize that every benefit you receive might carry a hidden cost, a hidden corpse. What does it mean to live ethically in a world like this? It means discomfort. It means responsibility. It means choosing to look, even when it's easier not to. You can't undo all harm, but you can stop pretending your hands are clean. You can refuse to turn away. You can ask yourself, every time you make a choice, who will suffer because of this? You won't always know the answer, but asking the question matters. Because that question, simple, brutal, honest, pulls morality out of the abstract and anchors it in the real. And maybe that's the beginning of something real. Not perfection, not purity, but consciousness, accountability, a flicker of humanity in the face of a machine that profits off your blindness. Every decision you make creates someone who suffers. That's not an accusation, it's a reality. A truth most people spend their whole lives avoiding. But you're not most people. You're listening, you're asking. And that means you're already changing the shape of the suffering, even if only a little, even if only for one person. And sometimes that's enough. You find it in your mailbox. No stamp, no return address, no postmark. Just your name, written in handwriting so hauntingly familiar it freezes you mid-step. You tear it open. Curiosity wrestled into urgency, and inside is a letter. From the person you could have been, not a metaphor, not a dream. A voice from the unlived life, and it knows you. It begins gently, almost lovingly. I remember when we were the same person, it says. You and I shared the same childhood, same dreams, same fire. But then something changed. You blinked, hesitated, chose safety over risk. And I kept walking. Your heart sinks. The letter isn't angry. It's disappointed. Not in who you are, but in how much of yourself you buried along the way. It remembers when you used to write stories, how you'd stay up all night with your imagination on fire. It remembers the girl you loved but never told, the job you never applied for, the boundaries you never enforced, the courage you abandoned, the moment comfort extended its hand. Then the words cut deeper. I lived the life you were too scared to pursue. I failed more than you ever dared. I lost people you were too afraid to love. I broke and rebuilt myself 100 times, but I never looked away from the mirror. You did. You clutched the paper. The ink feels heavier now, like it's etched in guilt. But it doesn't hate you. It pities you, because it knows the weight you're carrying. Regret. The letter describes a world that could have been yours. A world of chaos, yes, but also of clarity. A world where you chased truth instead of appearances. Where your pain had meaning because it was chosen, not inherited. Where your silence didn't buy you peace. It only delayed your collapse. You don't remember the moment you lost me, it continues. Because it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. You said, maybe later, one too many times. You chose someone else's approval over your own instincts. You let fear dress itself up as wisdom. You try to defend yourself, but the letter anticipates that too. I understand, you had responsibilities. You needed stability. But tell me, has all this safety made you feel safe? Or just stuck? You don't know how to answer that. Maybe you do. But you're afraid of the truth. Because deep down, you've always known this person existed. A version of you unafraid to disrupt, to confront, to leap. They were reckless, but whole. You by contrast are careful and fractured. Then the letter shifts. I'm not writing to punish you, it says. I'm writing to remind you, I'm still in here, trapped under layers of should-haves and almosts. And if you stop lying to yourself long enough, you might still find me, piece by piece. It ends with a final warning, but don't wait too long. Every day you pretend this version of you doesn't exist. I fade. I become harder to reach, easier to forget, until one day, you'll wake up and realize the scariest part. I'm not coming back. You fold the letter slowly, hands trembling, the room suddenly too quiet. You wonder how many more of these you'll receive before you finally answer back, not with words but with action. Because somewhere, within the shadow of your own life, the person you could have been is still waiting, not to blame you, not to shame you, but to be reclaimed. You're walking through a corridor of your own thoughts when you hear a voice call your name. It's familiar, but then another voice, equally yours, calls out from the other end. And suddenly you're split in half. Both voices sound like you. Both claim to be the real one. Both hold your memories, your feelings, your dreams, and both accuse the other of being the imposter. This isn't science fiction. This is a real question of consciousness. And it's tearing your mind in two. This is imagine stepping into a teleportation machine. This is amazing, but the kind that scans your body down to the last atom, disassembles it, and reassembles you perfectly on the other side. You step in, vanish, and moments later, you emerge somewhere else. You feel the same, think the same. You even remember stepping into the machine. But here's the twist. What if the original you wasn't destroyed? What if the machine malfunctioned and created two of you? Identical down to the last molecule, same scars, same thoughts, same sense of humor. Two minds, one past, and both swear they're the original. Who gets to be you? Which one goes home? If you had to choose, kill one, save one, how would you decide? Would you flip a coin, test their memories, measure their emotions? Or would you freeze, unable to condemn either one, because deep down you see the horror, that identity isn't stable. It's a mask worn by the brain. And now, two masks are claiming the same soul. You're not watching a sci-fi problem. You're watching the fragility of the self unravel in real time. And it gets worse. Split-brain patients, people whose left and right brain hemispheres were surgically separated, offer terrifying clues. After the surgery, their hands can act independently, their beliefs can contradict, their preferences diverge. One hemisphere might believe in God, the other doesn't. One side laughs at a joke, the other side doesn't even understand it. So who is the real person? If your brain can house multiple conflicting perspectives simultaneously, then your sense of being one is an illusion, a fragile truce, a performance the mind stages to keep you sane. And when that illusion breaks, you don't get chaos, you get something worse, ambiguity. You're both people, and yet you're neither. You're watching your own identity, split like glass under pressure, clean, silent, irreversible. But the horror isn't in the duplication. It's in the realization that you've always been two people or more arguing behind the curtain of your consciousness. The rational voice and the emotional one. The bold self and the anxious self. The dreamer and the doubter. They take turns driving. You just mistake their chorus for unity. And now you've heard them separately, and you can't unhear it. This thought experiment doesn't just break your mind, it breaks your continuity. Because if your identity can be cloned, split, or contradicted, then it was never solid to begin with. You were never a constant I, just a stream of shifting perspectives, stitched together by memory and habit. So what now? You wake up tomorrow, and you hear the voices again, slightly out of sync, slightly misaligned. One says you're brave, the other calls you a fraud. Which do you believe? Which do you silence? And which one are you pretending not to be? Because maybe that's the real experiment. Not whether identity can be split, but whether you'll ever admit that it already is. You wake up in a room you've never seen before, but it feels familiar. There's a toothbrush in the bathroom with frayed bristles like it's been used 1,000 times. A coffee mug on the counter with lipstick you recognize. A closet filled with clothes that fit you perfectly, styled exactly how you choose. You walk outside and strangers wave. They know your name, but you don't know theirs. You've inherited a life, but you don't remember living it. This isn't just a science fiction scenario. It's a psychological trap, one that reflects a terrifying truth about how identity, memory, and narrative work. Memory is not a recording. It's a reconstruction. Every time you recall a moment, you alter it. You repaint it with the brush of your current emotions, your present self. Now imagine if those memories never existed in the first place. Who would you be? Are you your memories, or are you the story they tell? But here's the twist. What if the story keeps going without your permission? What if the self you become is built on assumptions, routines, and habits you didn't choose? Maybe it already is. Your habits, your behaviors, even your preferences, they're often inherited, not from genetics, but from repetition, from social mimicry, from years of quiet conditioning. The food you crave, the God you worship, the clothes you wear. How many of those choices are truly yours? You walk into a life that's been waiting for you, not by fate, but by default. And slowly, imperceptibly, you accept it. You don't question why certain people are in your life. You don't ask why you fear the things you fear. You don't investigate the origins of your shame or pride. You just live the script you were handed. A script that began long before you were conscious enough to read it. And the scariest part, you think it's you. You think you're choosing. Imagine being dropped into a role mid-play. Everyone else knows their lines. You're the only one improvising. You try to catch up. You copy what others expect. And eventually you stop improvising. You memorize the role. You become the character. Now imagine never realizing you are acting at all. This is the quiet horror of inherited identity. You don't remember choosing it, but it wraps around you like skin, and questioning it feels like peeling that skin off. Painful, disorienting, terrifying. But what if you did question it? What if you traced every belief you hold back to its source? Would you still believe it, or would it crumble under the weight of its unexamined origins? What if you realized the job you work, the relationships you maintain, the dreams you chase, weren't born from your soul, but adopted like hand-me-downs? And what if changing it meant losing everything that makes life feel stable? Here's the cruel trick. The more you grow, the more alien your own life begins to feel. Because growth isn't just learning something new, it's unlearning everything false. That's the real awakening. Not an epiphany, not a single moment of clarity, but a slow, creeping disintegration of certainty. You realize your opinions are echoes, your morals are inherited, your routines are scripts, and the you've been defending so fiercely might just be a collection of borrowed instincts wrapped in fear. You didn't build your life, you inherited it, and you don't remember why. So what now? You could retreat, cling harder to the comfort of narrative, accept the false stability of the known, or you could do something radical. You could let it all fall apart, let the false self decay, watch the world you've accepted as yours melt into ambiguity, and then, only then, start choosing, not reacting, not obeying, choosing. Maybe you'll keep some of the old pieces, maybe you won't, but for the first time they'll be yours. You'll live a life you remember choosing, and that, terrifying as it is, might be the only honest way to live. Have you ever had a dream that felt so real, it clung to you for hours after waking? The kind that makes you question whether this world, the one with bills and coffee and gravity, is the real dream. And the other was something else. Now imagine this. You wake up one day, look around, and realize that everyone you love, your friends, your parents, your partner, they all dreamed it too. Not just something similar, the exact same dream. Word for word, moment for moment. At first it's exciting. You laugh about the coincidence. Maybe it's just a shared memory triggered by something you all watched. But then you start describing the details, the strange symbols etched into the sky, the whispering forest that never ended, the figure in the distance that kept turning away, and they know exactly what you mean. They saw it too. And slowly, the excitement curdles into something else. Because now you're not just asking what the dream meant. You're asking what asterisk is asterisk, this reality, if something like that is possible. Dreams have always been private theaters, silent films flickering behind closed eyelids. But if other people are watching the same movie, who's directing it? You begin to notice things. The way people speak in the dream, the cadence, the logic, the cold neutrality matches the way some strangers talk in real life. The way certain moments replay. The dreams don't feel like dreams anymore. They feel like visits. Scheduled check-ins with another world and your loved ones. They're all passengers on the same invisible train, traveling night after night to the same place. Now the question isn't, why are we sharing dreams? It's, have we always been? What if every memory you have of childhood dreams, the ones you thought were nonsense or nightmares, were actually shared? What if your parents asterisk knew asterisk but never told you? What if that imaginary friend you swore was real, and your mother saw them too, but pretended not to? This realization creeps in slowly, like rot in the foundation. If dreams can be shared, what else can? Memories, regrets, guilt. You remember something awful from a dream, something you did, something unforgivable, and when you mention it, someone else turns pale. They were there, they remember. You can feel your mind buckling under the pressure of this implication that your inner world might not be yours at all. It begins to haunt you, not the dream itself, but the knowing that privacy might be a lie, that consciousness might not be a sealed vault, but a hallway with unlocked doors. You thought your thoughts were your own, now you're not sure. You start to test it. Before falling asleep, you write down a phrase, something nonsense. You whisper it aloud, and the next day, someone you love says it back to you over breakfast without realizing. You freeze. They don't even notice. It hits you then. If this is a dream, and you're all inside it, whose dream is it? Is it yours, theirs, or someone, or something else's entirely? Maybe it's none of you. Maybe you're just characters in a story being written by an unseen author. Maybe free will is a flattering illusion, and your thoughts are echoes of a deeper narrative you can't access. Or worse, maybe you're in a simulation, and the shared dream was a glitch, a moment when the partitions broke down and the veil slipped. You weren't supposed to notice each other. You weren't supposed to connect, but now you have. You try to go back to normal, to forget, but you can't. Every dream since then pulls you all back into that place, and you start to miss the surreal logic, the strange beauty, the unfiltered rawness. Compared to waking life, the dream feels more honest, more real. And eventually you begin to wonder, what if this life, this waking reality, is the fake one? You consider the unthinkable. What if dying here doesn't end you? What if it wakes you up, not in a metaphorical, spiritual sense, but literally? What if death is just the moment the dream ends and you remember who you really are? You can't shake the feeling. You see it in the eyes of the people you love, the same quiet dread, the same aching hope. You stop talking about the dreams, but you all still feel it. You're not alone in this, not anymore. And now, sleep isn't rest, it's reunion. And life has become the stranger dream, one you're just waiting to wake up from. You think you're the protagonist, the hero, the well-meaning person just trying to do their best. And for the most part, you are. That's the terrifying part. Because one day, without warning, someone looks at you and you realize you're the villain in their story. And worse, they're not wrong. It starts with a memory, something small, a disagreement, a decision you made that seemed harmless. But in their version of events, that choice spiraled. That choice broke something you didn't even know was fragile. And now they carry the aftermath, like a scar that you never noticed you left. At first, you deny it. You explain. You defend. You remind them of your intentions, your context, your reasoning. You think if they just understood you better, they'd forgive you. But you're missing the point. They don't need to understand your logic, because their pain doesn't come from what you meant. It comes from what you did. You want morality to be clean, linear. You want to believe that if your heart was in the right place, your hands must be clean too. But the world doesn't work like that. Harm isn't erased by good intentions. Pain isn't cancelled out by perspective. And sometimes your righteousness is someone else's ruin. You're not used to thinking of yourself this way. You're careful, thoughtful. You try to be kind, but kindness is not a shield. Even good people cast long shadows. Even empathy has blind spots. And sometimes the most dangerous harm is done by people who truly believe they would never do harm at all. You think about the stories you've told yourself, that you're the dependable one, the forgiving one, the one who always tried. But what if their version is just as true? What if to them you're the manipulative one, the cold one, the one who never really listened. Suddenly, your narrative fractures. It doesn't dissolve, it splits. Two truths, equally real, equally painful, standing in contradiction. You didn't mean to hurt them, but you did. And now, intention becomes irrelevant. Only impact remains. This realization eats at you. You replay moments, rehearse conversations. You start to see the cracks, the times you were dismissive, impatient, condescending, the silences that were heavy, the words that hit harder than you knew. You remember their face, the way they paused before answering, and you wonder how long they've carried this version of you, silently, while you lived blissfully unaware. And then comes the hardest part. You see that they needed something from you, something small, something you didn't think to give. Patience, attention, accountability. And because you didn't offer it, they began to rewrite who you were in their mind. Not out of spite, but to survive, to make sense of the pain, to reclaim power over a story that had once made them feel powerless. So you become the villain, not by cruelty, but by carelessness, not by intention, but by omission. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You realize how many lives you've passed through, like a storm. How many stories you're a chapter in, unknowingly. How many people remember you, not with warmth, but with a quiet ache, a lesson learned too late. You start to understand that being good is not enough. It never was. Goodness, without awareness, is just a blindfold. Now you're left with a choice. You can reject their version. Call it exaggerated, misunderstood. You can retreat into your self-image, polish it, protect it. Or you can sit with it. Let it haunt you. Let it shape you. Because maybe this is where morality really begins. Not in being right, but in being willing to be wrong. In being willing to see yourself not as the hero, but as someone capable of damage, capable of being both loved and resented, remembered fondly and feared quietly. A contradiction wearing human skin. This is the final stage of self-awareness. You are not who you think you are in everyone's eyes, and you never were. And sometimes the only way to become the person you believe you are is to first admit you haven't always been them. To step into the discomfort, to own the shadow, and to accept that sometimes the villain wasn't someone else, it was you. Imagine waking up in a world where someone else hears your voice when they think. Not your real voice, the sound that comes from your throat, but the one inside your head, your inner monologue, your private, constant stream of thoughts. Now imagine someone else's internal experience is narrated with your words, your cadence, your doubts, your fears. This isn't science fiction. It's a philosophical rupture. In psychology, there's a name for the voice in your head. The inner speech. It's how we process the world, reflect, problem solve, and regulate behavior. Most people believe their inner voice is theirs alone, safe, sealed within the confines of their mind. But what if it's not? What if, under certain conditions, another person could develop an inner monologue modeled after yours? Not by coincidence, but by design. Let's start with something simple. Mirror neurons. These are the cells in your brain that fire not only when you do something, but also when you see someone else doing it. They're why you cringe when someone stubs their toe or feel joy watching someone smile. But mirror neurons don't just mimic actions, they mimic intention, emotion, even patterns of thought. Imagine a child growing up with a parent whose voice is calm, rational, yet anxious beneath the surface. Over time, that child begins to hear that same rhythm, that same blend of tension and logic in their own thoughts. Not because it's biologically theirs, but because it was copied unconsciously, completely. Now apply that to a toxic relationship. Imagine someone slowly replacing your inner voice with theirs, critique by critique, comment by comment. Every time you mess up, you hear their disapproval before your own. Every time you succeed, you brace for their dismissal. Until one day, even when they're gone, their voice stays, as if they've carved themselves into your mind. That's not memory, that's mental colonization. This happens more than we admit. Parents, partners, teachers, employers, they don't just influence your behavior, they shape your cognition. You internalize their expectations, their tone, even their disappointments. And eventually, their voice becomes indistinguishable from your own. But what happens when this process is reversed? What if your voice, your exact thought patterns, get absorbed into someone else? What if, unknowingly, you become the ghost narrating their reality? You might not even notice it, but they do. They start finishing your thoughts, quoting things you never said out loud, predicting how you'd react, not through logic, but through an eerie kind of familiarity, as if you're inside them, as if their brain, desperate for direction, reached out and borrowed yours. It sounds impossible until you remember how malleable the human mind really is. We're all narrative creatures. Our identities are forged through stories we tell ourselves, and those stories are rarely original. We borrow tone from movies, structure from books, rhythm from speeches. We are stitched together from the voices around us. So what happens when someone is especially vulnerable, lonely, depressed, identity stripped? They need a voice to guide them, and if yours is available, strong, consistent, persuasive, they'll take it, piece by piece, until your thoughts become their compass, your doubts, their script, your voice, their voice. You become their surrogate consciousness. But now here's the truly terrifying part. What if they don't know it? What if one day they begin to question whether their thoughts are really their own? They notice strange phrasing in their internal dialogue, ideas that don't match their personality, memories narrated in a voice that doesn't feel right. And then it hits them, someone else is living in their head. Not in the literal sense, not possession or mind control, but influence so deep it bypasses awareness, so deep it masquerades as self. They don't remember inviting you in, but you're there, whispering advice, delivering shame, providing validation, coloring every decision, every fear, every hope. And the scariest realization, you didn't mean to do it. You never asked to be in their head. You never intended to overwrite their inner voice. But you did, through proximity, through intimacy, through repetition. Your psychological fingerprint has overwritten theirs. Your voice, once external, has become their default. And now you wonder how many people are carrying pieces of you. How many minds echo your influence, without you even knowing, or more disturbingly, whose voice is living inside you? Because if you've ever caught yourself thinking a thought that didn't quite feel like yours, you already know the answer. You're going through old security footage when you see something strange. It's your apartment, your clothes, your voice, but something's off. You're quieter, straighter, clearer. You speak without evasion. You answer questions with raw honesty. You say things you've never admitted out loud, even to yourself. This version of you has never lied, not to others, not to themselves. And suddenly, you're watching a life that could have been yours. Let's follow them. This alternate you, call them true you, moves differently. They're not weighed down by pretending. They don't laugh at jokes. They don't find funny. They don't nod in agreement when something feels wrong. And they don't say yes when everything in their body screams no. You realize how much of your own day is spent managing impressions, smoothing over truth for convenience, comfort, survival. True you doesn't do that. And here's what's terrifying. They're not liked as much. You watch as friends bristle at their candor. You see their co-workers stiffen when they point out something unfair. They don't sugarcoat things. They don't offer compliments. They don't believe. They don't apologize unless they mean it. But they also don't carry your anxiety. That quiet, pulsing tension of being caught in a lie, white or otherwise. They aren't performing. They aren't exhausted by masks. They just are. What does it cost to never lie? They're lonelier. You see them at parties, on the edges, watching others drink in the ease of performance, watching the smiles that cover discomfort. They don't fake it, and in return, they often find themselves alone. But look closer. They're not empty. They're not broken. They're clear. Their solitude isn't hollow. It's chosen. They've traded approval for authenticity. And while that's a cost, most of us can't stomach, you wonder, for the first time, if it might be worth it. Because with clarity comes power. True. You never second guesses. Never replays conversations in their head, dissecting what they should have said, what they should have hidden. They say it. They live it. And then they let it go. And here's the deepest cut. They're braver than you. Not because they face external danger, but because they face the internal one. The fear of rejection, the fear of disapproval, the fear of seeing who you really are when all the lies are peeled away. They confront it daily, not out of masochism, but out of necessity. Because to them, a life lived in fiction isn't a life, it's a sentence. You think about all the times you said you were fine when you were drowning. The dreams you dismissed because they felt unrealistic. The truths you buried because they threatened your image. You called it maturity. You called it adapting. But maybe it was just fear, disguised as pragmatism. You fast forward. True, you isn't rich. They aren't famous. They haven't achieved the kind of success you fantasize about. But their face in the mirror isn't ashamed. Their eyes are steady. There's no trace of the self-betrayal you've grown used to seeing. And now you're faced with the real question. What if you've built your entire life on lies, so small, so constant? You don't even recognize them anymore. What if every nod, every smile, every silence in the face of wrongness has slowly hollowed you out? Gee. And what if the person you were supposed to be, the version of you who never lied, has been waiting all along, just on the other side of honesty? Not perfect, not safe, but real. Maybe that's what scares you most. Not that they're better, but that they're free. You wake up in a cold, windowless room. There's no clock, no phone, just a single light overhead and a mirror on the wall. But it's not your reflection staring back. It's someone else, someone who looks exactly like you, but older, worn down, disappointed. They speak without moving their lips. This was a test, and you failed. At first you laugh, nervous, confused. What kind of test? No one told you there was a test. No instructions, no guidelines, just life, messy, chaotic, unfair. But that's the point, isn't it? You were never supposed to know. That was part of the experiment. See, most people imagine life as a journey, a series of goals, achievements, moments of joy strung together by the passage of time. But what if that's a lie? What if everything you thought was meaningful, your job, your relationships, even your identity, was just data collection? You weren't living, you were being observed. Every choice you made, every rationalization, every compromise, every silence in the face of injustice. It was all being measured, not in the way you imagined. Not success or failure by society's standards, but something deeper, something moral, something existential. And now the results are in. You failed, not because you made mistakes. Everyone does, but because you stopped noticing them. You stopped caring. You convinced yourself the little lies didn't matter, that self-preservation was the same as survival, that comfort was more important than truth. You were given empathy, and you numbed it. You were given time, and you wasted it. You were given freedom, and you traded it for routine. Worse, you convinced yourself you were doing the right thing. You passed up the uncomfortable conversation that could have saved a friendship. You looked away from the injustice you could have resisted. You told yourself you were powerless, when really you were just afraid. Afraid to change, afraid to be different, afraid to wake up. You see, the test wasn't about outcomes. It was about awareness, about whether you'd notice the cage, whether you'd see the bars weren't made of steel, but of habit, fear, and quiet resignation. You were supposed to ask questions, but you memorized answers instead. You were supposed to break the rules that didn't make sense, but you followed them blindly. You were supposed to become something more, but you settled for being liked. And now you sit in the aftermath. A life lived by someone else's script. A path walked without ever looking up. And the mirror? It's not showing your future. It's showing what you could have been, what you chose not to be. And here's the part that hurts the most. You knew all along that something was wrong, that the noise was a distraction, that the praise was a bribe, that the comfort was a trap. You felt the truth vibrating beneath your skin, and you ignored it, because acknowledging it would mean tearing your world apart. So you chose silence, and silence became surrender. This was the test. Would you choose authenticity over approval? Would you act when it counted, even if no one was watching? Would you face your fear and still move forward? You didn't, and the test is over. But not the punishment. That's the twist. The punishment isn't fire, it's not judgment, it's not even death. It's this: waking up and realizing you were capable of more, so much more, and you never even tried. The punishment is living with what could have been. It's knowing the door was always open, and you never walked through it. Imagine being born into a trial you never signed up for. No jury, no advocate, just a silent demand hanging over your head. Prove you deserve to exist. Not to yourself, not to the people who love you, but to strangers. Faceless, nameless arbiters of your worth. From the moment you step into the world, you're measured, weighed, categorized. Not by your potential, not by your complexity, but by the shallowest metrics a stranger can grasp. Your face, your clothes, your accent, your income, your job title. Every interaction becomes an audition, every moment a silent performance, and the stakes. Everything. This isn't just social anxiety, this is structural expectation. You walk into a room and already feel the question, unspoken but heavy. Why should we let you be here? Not just in this building, in this society, in this life. And the pressure to answer it becomes so internalized that you stop realizing it's even a question. You just feel the burn to be better, to be exceptional, to prove you're not just another burden, another mistake. The cruel irony is that the less you resemble the people in power, the more you have to prove. The further your background is from the accepted norm, the more performance is demanded. If you're poor, you must be brilliant. If you're marginalized, you must be eloquent, spotless, untouchable. You don't get to be average. You don't get to make mistakes. The baseline for acceptance is excellence. Not because you want to be extraordinary, but because you have no other choice, and it doesn't stop. Even when you excel, even when you overachieve, the doubt lingers. Was it luck? Was it charity? Was it a quota? You feel compelled to overperform, just to be allowed to exist on the same playing field as someone who barely tried. The bar shifts, but the burden never lifts. Your worth is never settled. It's always under review. Why is your existence treated like a privilege that must be justified? Because that's how control works. When people are made to feel like guests in their own country, in their own workplace, in their own skin, they behave better. They ask for less. They self-monitor. They self-censor. They don't revolt. When your belonging is conditional, you cling to compliance like a life raft. This is deeper than discrimination. It's systemic conditionality. It's a machine that teaches you, from day one, that you are not enough unless you are needed, unless you're productive, attractive, useful, and if you're not, then you're disposable. The system never says this out loud. It whispers it in subtle signs, in who gets promoted, who gets the benefit of the doubt, who gets forgiven, who gets killed in the street, and who gets to go home. The invisible criteria by which strangers decide if your existence is a threat or a contribution. So what do? You work, you polish, you shrink, you mold, you code switch. You translate your soul into something more palatable, more profitable. You smile when you're tired. You nod when you're offended. You play roles so convincingly that eventually even you forget you're acting. And still, it's not enough. Because the problem isn't you. The problem is the question itself. Prove you deserve to exist. It's a demand that no one should have to answer. And yet, it governs lives. Especially those born into the wrong coordinates of class, race, or gender. Especially those who can't afford the illusion of effortless belonging. So here's the paradox. The more you try to prove your worth, the more invisible the injustice becomes. Your excellence masks the cruelty of the test. It makes the system look fair, because it occasionally rewards a survivor. But survival is not proof of fairness. It's proof of endurance under pressure. No one should have to bear. We don't need to be told we're valuable. We need a world where value isn't a prerequisite for respect, where your humanity doesn't hinge on your utility, where you don't need to impress a stranger just to breathe without shame, because your existence is not a privilege. It's not a product. It's not a pitch. It's a fact. And the real question isn't whether you deserve to exist. It's why anyone ever believed they had the right to ask. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing everything around you, your home, your job, your relationships, wasn't yours. Not really. They belonged to someone who looked like you, talked like you, even remembered your past. But you've woken up in a different layer, a deeper layer, one step removed from the life you thought you were living. You've woken from the dream, but someone else has taken your place. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a philosophical rupture, a break in the fabric of identity. And it starts with a question no one wants to ask. If you could wake up to the truth, would you, even if it meant someone else would have to live your lie? Waking up sounds noble, enlightening, the hero's journey. But there's a hidden cost to awakening, and it's not paid by you alone. Because the moment you leave the illusion behind, someone else inherits it. You stop playing the part, but the part keeps playing, just with a new actor. And maybe that's the real trap. Not that you're stuck in a simulation, but that simulations self-replicate. Your exit just creates a vacancy. A void that something or someone has to fill. This is the paradox of awakening. The more people wake up, the more the illusion adapts, mutates, recruits. Every time a soul sees through the veil, another slips beneath it. Maybe that's why waking up feels so lonely. You look around and realize no one sees what you see anymore. You speak, but your words pass through them like smoke. They smile at you, nod politely, go about their day, but something in their eyes has shifted. They've become placeholders. The dream needs dreamers. The system needs actors. And if you're no longer willing to play your part, it finds someone who is. That's the cruel symmetry of consciousness. Escape doesn't eliminate the prison. It just moves you to a different cell. You stop believing in the story, and suddenly the story believes in someone else. Now think about this. What if the person who takes your place is happier than you ever were? They don't question the rules. They don't feel the weight. They smile more. They sleep better. They've accepted the dream as real, and the dream rewards acceptance. You, on the other hand, wander in the shadows of discarded truth. You see things you can't unsee, hear the static behind conversations, feel the artificiality in every hug, every job promotion, every goodnight kiss. Awareness isn't freedom, it's exile. And yet, you wouldn't go back, would you? Even if you could. Even if returning meant reclaiming comfort, regaining love, re-entering the warmth of shared delusion, you wouldn't do it. Because something in you changed, broke, awakened. And now you understand the cost of consciousness, permanence. Once the dream cracks, nothing can restore it. You've crossed the event horizon of self. But here's the real horror. You didn't wake up on your own. Someone else woke up first. And when they left the part to you. You inherited their illusion, lived their life, played their role until you too saw the glitch in the pattern. So now you see the cycle, don't you? Consciousness isn't an awakening, it's a contagion. One leaves, one enters, one awakens, one sleeps. You didn't choose to wake up, you were chosen. And now the dream assigns your abandoned role to someone new, just as it once assigned you. The moment you see that, you realize something terrifying. The dream never ends. It just changes hands. Imagine this. You're sitting alone, late at night, replaying a moment you wish had gone differently. A fight with a loved one. A missed opportunity. A choice that haunts you. Then the thought hits. What if you could go back? What if you could rewrite it? Perfectly. Not just remember it differently, but actually reach back into time and change it. There's only one catch. Every time you do it, you lose a year of your life. Not a metaphorical year. A real one. One less birthday. One less chance to laugh, love, or breathe. Time traded for peace. Tempting, isn't it? Think of all the moments you regret, the words you wish you hadn't said, the silence you should have broken, the paths you should have taken. This thought experiment doesn't ask whether you could go back. It asks whether you should whether fixing a moment is worth shortening your entire existence. Because that's what regret does. It magnifies single moments until they swallow entire years. But here's the twist. It's not just about fixing your mistakes. You could go back to prevent someone else's pain, save a relationship, change the outcome of a tragedy, right a wrong you weren't even responsible for. You could become a quiet god of your own timeline. But with every rewrite, your time thins. 10 corrections, 10 years gone, and soon you wouldn't be living anymore. You'd be curating, sculpting a version of life that looks perfect from the outside, but is hollowed from the inside out. Perfection has a cost, and the currency is you. Most of us already trade pieces of our lives for peace. We swallow words to keep others comfortable. We fake smiles to avoid conflict. We deny truths to stay functional. Each time we rewrite our reality, internally or externally, we lose a little bit of ourselves. So this isn't just science fiction. It's a metaphor for what we already do. But imagine the real version. You're handed a button, push it, and the moment reshapes. The fight never happened. The accident never occurred. The goodbye never became final. Push it again, and your biggest failure is erased. Push it enough times, and your life becomes seamless. But seamless doesn't mean full. It means flat, controlled, sanitized. All the chaos, pain, and randomness that gave life depth, gone. Then the price you pay isn't just years, it's texture, memory, growth. You wouldn't just lose time, you'd lose becoming. That's the paradox. We want to erase pain, yet it's pain that sharpens who we are. It teaches, warns, and remakes us. Take away your worst moments, and you risk taking away your most human ones. Still, if the button sat before you, glowing faintly in the dark, what would you do? Could you resist the pull? Because some moments really do ruin you. Some words really do shatter futures. The fantasy of a fix is seductive, not because it's rational, but because it offers power over the one thing we never control, the past. But that power is a lie. The more you use it, the more you vanish, until you wake up. Years gone, life trimmed like dead branches. A perfect record. An empty room, no pain, no past, no self. So here's the final question. Would you rather live a flawed, vivid life filled with scars and stories, or die early, untouchable, untarnished, unknown even to yourself? It's not just a trade, it's a trap. And once you start editing the past, it's never enough to fix one moment. You'll always find another. Always think it's worth it. Always tell yourself it'll be the last, until one day it is. You've never met this version of yourself before. They don't look that different. The same eyes, same nervous laugh, same quiet way of scanning the room like they're looking for exits instead of people. But there's something in the posture, looser, bolder, like they stopped carrying something. You still grip with white knuckles. You see it immediately, even if you don't want to. This is the version of you who made the one choice you avoided. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't. There's no warning before the encounter. No swelling music or revelation. Just a moment, ordinary and precise, when you lock eyes with the path not taken and it stares back. At first, you're just curious. What did they choose? What did they lose? Are they happier? Stronger? Broken? And then the questions turn sharp. Are they better? You tell yourself no. You rehearse it like a mantra. Because your choice, your chosen choice had reasons. You were protecting someone. You were being responsible. You were scared, but you had your limits. You didn't leap. You didn't speak. You didn't leave. They did. And that's when the envy starts. Not jealousy, envy. Because jealousy is about having what someone else has. Envy is about hating what their freedom says about your cage. You begin to notice what's missing in their eyes. That familiar flicker of hesitation. The constant calculation. The apology that lives in your voice even when you say nothing wrong. They don't have it. You did everything right. You followed the plan. You kept the peace. You didn't ruin anything. But they ruined everything. And somehow look freer for it. And then the guilt kicks in. Because you're not supposed to hate yourself for surviving. You're not supposed to mourn a life you chose not to live. You're not supposed to wonder if your entire identity was built around avoidance. But you do. You remember the night you almost said something you couldn't unsay. The job you nearly left. The apology you never gave. The confession you swallowed until it dissolved into something toxic. They said it. They left. They confessed. And the world didn't end. In fact, something began. You want to ask them, this mirror made flesh, how it felt. Were they terrified? Did it feel like dying? Was there a moment of regret before the ground caught them? But you don't ask. Because deep down, you know the answer. It did feel like dying. That's the point. Growth always mimics death before it feels like rebirth. And you weren't ready to bury the old self yet. So instead, you embalmed it. Kept it breathing just enough to pass for alive. And now you're face to face with the ghost you could have become. It's not that their life is perfect. You see the scars. They're not hiding them. If anything, they wear them with a kind of pride that makes you uncomfortable. Because your scars are internal, quiet, invisible. There's scream. You both made your choices, but only one of you has stopped apologizing for them. You start to wonder if this isn't just a vision of who you could have been, but who you still might become, if you're willing to pay the price. Because freedom isn't free. It never was. It costs comfort. It costs reputation. It costs certainty. And you didn't want to pay it. They did. But now you've seen the receipt, and something inside you shifts. Not a decision. Not yet. But the beginning of a crack. And maybe that's all it takes. Not a leap. Just a fracture. A split in the story you've told yourself for years. Because once you see the version of yourself who made the choice you avoided, you can't unsee them. And they don't vanish when you look away. They linger, like a challenge, like a day, like a door you never opened. That still somehow waits for you. You're standing in a dimly lit office, fluorescent lights humming faintly above you. The air smells of stale coffee and paper. Someone hands you a security tape. You need to see this, they say. You press play. And there you are on the screen. The timestamp is from last night. You're walking down a corridor you've never seen before, in a building you don't recognize, at a time you were supposedly asleep. Your gait is mechanical, almost deliberate. You stop, look directly at the camera, and smile. But here's the thing. You have no memory of this. None. You don't remember the walk, the place, the moment, not even the clothes you're wearing in the video. Your mind goes blank when you try to recall. And yet there's no denying it. That's your face, your posture, your mannerisms. You are watching yourself do something you never did. This is where the cracks begin. First, you question your memory. Maybe you're sleepwalking. Maybe you were drugged. Maybe it's some glitch, a prank, a deep fake. You go through every possibility, but none of them feel right. The video is too real, too precise, too intentional. Then the dread sets in. Because if your memory can't be trusted, what else have you forgotten? How many other things have you done that you don't remember? Are there other tapes, other nights, other acts? What if you've lived an entire other life that your conscious mind has repressed? This isn't just amnesia. This is something deeper, existential. You're staring at a version of yourself you don't know, a version that feels familiar but foreign. It moves like you, smiles like you, but it is not you, or is it? And then a darker thought creeps in. What if this version of you is the real one? What if the life you remember, the safe, linear, coherent story you tell yourself, is the illusion? What if your waking self is the mask, and this other self, the one on the screen, is the original? You start wondering if consciousness is just a surface-level narrator, stitching a story together to make you feel like you're in control. But underneath that thin veil of awareness, something else is piloting the machine. Something deeper, more primal, more hidden. This thought breaks something in you, because it means you're not the protagonist of your own life. You're a witness, an observer who's been tricked into thinking they're the author. Now every moment becomes suspicious. Every memory, every action, every conversation. Was that really you talking yesterday, or just another version playing a part? When you apologized to your friend, was that genuine, or just the algorithm running its charm routine? You look in the mirror and wonder who's staring back. Is this just one fragment of a larger consciousness, switching identities like masks, living multiple lives and discarding memories like old receipts? It gets worse. Imagine you track down the location in the video. You go there, and it's real. It exists. The same corridor, the same door. Everything matches. You touch the walls. You smell the air. It's not a dream. It's not a set. You were there. But no one else remembers you being there. No footage of you arriving. No record of entry. No trace in the logs. Just that single video, proof of something that shouldn't exist. And then you find a second tape. Different location. Different time. Same you. Now the fear mutates into something stranger. Because you realize this isn't about memory anymore. This is about identity. You start to consider the possibility that you're not a single person, that you are many people, that your sense of self is just the echo of whatever personality happens to be active in the moment. And the ones you don't remember, they're not gone, they're sleeping, waiting. Which version of you is watching the tape now? Which version will wake up tomorrow? You used to think your mind was a house. One house, yours, safe, private. But now it feels more like a hotel. Rooms you've never entered. Guests you don't recognize. Some just passing through. Others never leaving. And you're just the night manager, checking in. Keeping the lights on. Trying not to ask too many questions, because the answers might not be yours to hear. You were never meant to be you. That's the uncomfortable truth, clawing beneath your skin. You were constructed, not as a person, but as a response, a reaction, a monument to someone else's guilt, built from flesh, breath, and expectations. And it didn't start with you. It started before you, in moments you never witnessed, in decisions made by people you may never even know. A betrayal, a failure, a regret so large it couldn't be erased, only masked. So they had a child, they had you. Not because the world needed you, not even because they wanted you, but because they needed a way to say, "I'm sorry," without ever using those words. You became their second chance, their do-over, their redemption arc. This isn't love. This is strategy. Parents don't always admit it, but many have children not just for joy or legacy, but to heal something broken inside themselves. A child to replace the sibling they lost. A child to prove they're better than their own parents. A child to stay when everyone else left. And when you're that child, you don't grow up free. You grow up twisted into the shape of an apology you never asked to be. You start to notice it in subtle ways. The way your choices are never really yours. The way your pain is inconvenient, evidence that their plan isn't working. You're told what you should be, what you must become, how you're expected to act. And when you try to stray, when you stumble toward autonomy, they flinch like you've reopened an old wound. Because you have. Your independence threatens the very narrative they built you to sustain. You are the evidence they use to prove to themselves that they've changed. So they mold you into kindness, into obedience, into a reflection that flatters their regret. And when you deviate, when you cry too loudly, fail too publicly, rebel too sharply, they don't just feel disappointed, they feel betrayed. Not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer serving the purpose they built you for. The worst part, you internalize it. You start to believe your worth is conditional, tied to how well you heal someone else's pain. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You crave approval, not for your own growth, but to confirm their story is still intact. Your life becomes a performance, a desperate act to keep their ghosts at bay. And when the performance fails, when you collapse under the weight of expectations never meant for you, they look confused, as if they can't understand how their apology could break. But how could it not? You were never supposed to carry this. You weren't born to fix someone's guilt. You weren't meant to validate someone else's redemption. You are not a monument to the past. You are not an apology in human form. Yet here you are, raised not to discover who you are, but to become who they needed you to be. This realization hits like grief. It's not just about them, it's about everything. Every moment you thought was yours. Every dream you pursued that was really theirs. Every fear you silenced because it didn't fit the image. You wonder how much of you is truly you and how much is just inherited penance. And the answer isn't simple, because once you've been built to be someone else's apology, reclaiming yourself isn't clean. It's messy, it's painful, it feels like betrayal, even when it's survival. But it's also necessary, because the truth is, you're not a symbol, you're a person, and you deserve to exist beyond someone else's narrative. You deserve to make mistakes that are yours, to chase joy that's yours, to live a life that isn't haunted by echoes of someone else's guilt. You don't have to keep playing the role. You don't have to carry the weight. You can let the apology fall, and in its place, begin again, not as someone's redemption, but as someone finally free. You fall in love with someone. Their smile cracks open something inside you. The way they speak, specific, precise, almost like they've read your thoughts before you think them. Feels like fate. You don't just love them, you believe in them. You believe they're real, and they are, but only in one version of reality. Multiverse theory isn't just science fiction anymore. It's a serious framework in quantum physics, suggesting that countless alternate realities might coexist, each one branching from a different decision, a different outcome, a different you. Every time you made a choice, a new timeline may have split off, where a different version of your life unfolds. Some timelines barely differ. Others diverge completely. Now imagine this. In one of these timelines, you met them in just one. Not in this one. Not here. This version of reality, the one you wake up in every day, doesn't include them. Here, they never walked into that bookstore, never sat next to you on that flight, never wrote their number on your coffee cup. Your paths never crossed. And yet, somehow, you remember them. Not vaguely, not like a dream, but with agonizing clarity. You remember how they laughed when you made fun of their taste in movies. You remember what their skin felt like under your fingertips. You remember their silence, soft, warm, safe, when words weren't necessary. You remember everything, but they're gone. Or maybe they never existed. Not here, not now. This is the psychological horror of quantum memory. The unprovable torment of loving someone you're certain was real, but whom no one else remembers. You carry a relationship in your mind that exists nowhere in the world. You search for evidence, photos, texts, memories you shared with mutual friends, but find nothing. It's as if they were erased, redacted from your life, like a file deleted from a hard drive. And still, your body remembers. The emotional imprint lingers. You feel haunted, not by a ghost, but by a version of the past that refuses to die. So which is more terrifying? That you're wrong, that your brain is malfunctioning, confabulating a perfect love it never actually experienced? Or that you're right, and the universe has somehow split you from the only person who ever truly knew you? Maybe both are equally devastating. This love, so vivid, so complete, becomes your prison. Every other connection feels flat by comparison. You try to move on, but how do you compare someone real to someone who's perfect in every conceivable way? Someone sculpted not just by memory, but by possibility itself. You don't miss them like you miss an ex. You ache for them like an amputee aches for a lost limb, feeling something that is no longer there, yet never stops existing inside you. And here's the cruelest part. Your mind can't distinguish between a memory from this universe and a memory imported from another. Emotion doesn't require truth. It only requires conviction. So your love feels real. Your loss feels real. Even if none of it ever happened here. In psychological terms, it might resemble maladaptive daydreaming or confabulation. But what if those terms are just our way of explaining away phenomena that terrify us too deeply to confront? What if your brain isn't broken, but open, glimpsing through the cracks of reality, remembering lives you've lived elsewhere? The idea that reality is not fixed, that it might bend or branch without warning, leads to a profound loneliness. If versions of you exist in other worlds, married, content, fulfilled, what is this version? What are you left with here? Are you the leftover, the wrong one, the fragment who didn't get the happy ending? The fear isn't just that love is gone, it's that it was never yours to begin with. And yet, you can't let it go. You can't stop searching. Every stranger's face becomes a question. Every dream becomes a possible reunion. Every silence becomes a maybe. You're not chasing a person. You're chasing a memory of a different reality. One where love was real. One where you were whole. And maybe that's the darkest truth of all. That the heart doesn't need reality to break. It only needs hope. Hope that somewhere, in some unseen corner of the multiverse, they still remember you too. Imagine walking through a crowded room. Dozens of eyes brush against you. Some linger, some judge, some forget you, instantly. But in each glance, something happens, something subtle, almost imperceptible. You shift, just a little. A micro-adjustment of posture, a slight smile, a recalibration of tone. And whether you notice it or not, a version of you is born in their mind. That version might be confident, or awkward, mysterious, or forgettable. But it isn't you. It's a reflection, filtered, warped, and stitched together from their assumptions, their expectations, their own needs. And here's the catch. The more you're seen, the more these reflections pile up, not just out there, but inside you. Every time someone sees you, you start to see yourself a little differently. You perform, you adapt, you mutate, because identity isn't just what you are, it's what you reflect. And reflection changes depending on the mirror. Let's take a step back. Imagine yourself alone in a room with no mirrors, no cameras, no observers. Who are you? You might think, I'm still me, but what parts of that me survive in solitude? Without feedback, without the watchful eye of another human being, what remains of your mannerisms, even your thoughts? You'd be shocked at how much of what you consider yourself is really just a performance stitched together from the expectations of others. You laugh a certain way because it made someone else smile. You dress a certain way because it earned approval. You censor yourself because last time someone flinched. You adapt again and again until eventually you can't remember what was original and what was reaction. This isn't weakness. This is survival. Evolution wired us for social feedback. Being seen favorably used to mean the difference between being part of the tribe or being cast out. Even now, in our modern world, the consequences of being seen wrong can feel just as brutal. Social rejection, alienation, loss of opportunity. So we adapt, not once, but constantly. Every room, every encounter, every glance demands a new version of you. But here's the paradox. The more you're seen, the less you belong to yourself. You start borrowing fragments of your identity from everyone you meet. One person makes you feel powerful, another small. One sees your potential, Another sees your past, and with each new gaze, you recalibrate, you reshape. You become a collage of impressions, stitched together with invisible thread. Now imagine the implications. You walk through the world carrying versions of yourself that don't even belong to you. You try to live up to images others created. You feel guilt, shame, pride, not from your own internal compass, but from how you were perceived. You start to fear being misread. You become addicted to being seen correctly. And slowly, your identity becomes less about who you are and more about managing who others think you are. This is the exhausting dance of social identity, always performed, rarely authentic. But the deepest danger, you start to believe it's you. The version your boss sees, your partner sees, your audience sees. You start to treat their reflections as truth, even when it hurts. You hold yourself accountable to their expectations. You apologize for feelings you didn't choose. You suppress instincts that don't fit their narrative. And every time you do, you lose a little more of yourself. There's a term in psychology, the looking glass self. It's the idea that we construct our identity based on how we think others perceive us. Not how they actually see us, but how we imagine they do. It's not just their gaze that shapes us. It's our anticipation of their judgment. And this anticipation is powerful enough to rewrite you. Because you don't just react to their feedback, you preempt it. You shape yourself in advance. You become fluent in their language, skilled in their expectations. And in doing so, you trade authenticity for acceptance. It's why social anxiety feels like death. Because it's not just fear of judgment, it's fear of identity collapse. When others see us differently than we see ourselves, it feels like we're being erased, overwritten, replaced. And perhaps, in some way, we are. So what does this mean? It means your identity is fragile, mutable, not fixed, but fluid, not discovered, but constantly constructed. And every interaction is a negotiation between who you are and who the world allows you to be. This can be terrifying, but also liberating. Because if your identity is constantly changing, then you are never stuck. You are never final. You are not obligated to remain a character written by someone else's script. You can rewrite yourself, not to please them, but to reclaim you. But to do that, you must first recognize the lie. The lie that there's one true, stable version of you waiting to be revealed. There isn't. There never was. There's only the story you tell, and the courage to tell it without needing everyone else to believe it. You sit in a crowded room. Laughter bounces off the walls. Conversations overlap. Glasses clink. Everyone is saying something, but you stay silent. And in that silence, something shifts. You begin to feel it, not just your own emotions, but theirs. The subtle tremor in someone's voice, 2 tables over. The tightness behind a smile from across the room. The fatigue buried in a friend's eyes that no one else seems to notice. In your silence, you hear what words conceal, because speech isn't always a tool for connection. Often, it's camouflage, a mask. People talk to fill space, to protect themselves from being seen. But silence has no mask. It sees through everything. It cuts beneath the noise. This is the hidden truth. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. Not just sounds, but suffering. The dissonance in someone's posture. The way their laugh falters half a second too early. You begin to recognize emotional frequencies like a second language. But there's a cost, because once you hear it, really hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you feel it, it's yours. Empathy isn't a soft virtue, it's brutal. It doesn't just make you kinder, it makes you more vulnerable, more responsible. And if you're silent long enough, if you listen deeply enough, the boundaries blur. Their pain becomes your pain. You're no longer a separate observer. You're a vessel, a mirror. You reflect what they carry, and sometimes you carry it too. But here's the paradox. To truly feel someone else's pain, you must silence your own voice. You must mute your reactions, your judgments, your stories. You must resist the urge to fix, to advise, to compare. And in doing so, you vanish a little. Your identity fades into the background. Your ego dissolves. This is why most people don't do it. Why they can't. Because to empathize deeply is to disappear, to dissolve into someone else's experience and let their truth swallow your own. It's an act of disappearance, of self-abandonment. And the world doesn't reward this. It doesn't reward the one who listens silently. It rewards the one who speaks confidently, who asserts, who commands attention. We live in a society addicted to noise, where volume is mistaken for value, and interruption is confused for insight. But silence is where the real work happens. In that space, something sacred unfolds. You begin to recognize patterns. How much of what people say is a cry for understanding in disguise. How even cruelty is often the mask of fear. How anger is just grief that never found a home. But you can't reach this understanding if you're always speaking. If you're always trying to be heard, you miss what others are really saying. This is the burden of the quiet. You become the keeper of pain. No one else wants to acknowledge. You start to see the invisible fractures in people's lives. You notice the trembling in someone's hands when they talk about their day. The way their voice changes when they say, "I'm fine." You feel their despair, unspoken, disowned, buried beneath politeness. And still you say nothing. Not because you don't care, but because you know your silence is the only space where their truth can breathe. But there's danger here too. Because if you listen too long without speaking, if you absorb without release, their pain can consume you. Empathy becomes erosion. The line between you and the world dissolves. You begin to drown in feelings that aren't yours. So what do? You learn to hold without holding, to feel without fusing, to witness without disappearing. And that's a skill, a sacred one. It's what therapists, monks, caregivers, and the wisest friends know. That healing isn't about fixing. It's about presence, stillness. It's about being the place where another person's pain doesn't need to perform. But here's the final twist. The moment you break your silence to say something comforting or wise or reassuring, you change the dynamic. You step back into your identity. You offer something of yourself, which means the pure channel is gone. And maybe that's okay. Maybe silence isn't meant to last forever. But in that moment before you speak, there's power. In that suspended breath, that open space, you are more than a person. You are a witness, a mirror, a sanctuary, and the world needs more of those. Not louder voices, but quieter hearts. Imagine this. You go to sleep one night, drifting off in the same bed you've always known. But while your mind sinks into dreams, a perfect replica of you, every neuron, every memory, every habit is printed in a sterile lab across the city. Identical in every way. Now here's the question. Who wakes up first, you or the copy? Identity splits. We like to believe that there's only one you, a continuous self tethered to your body, your memories, your consciousness. But what if that tether is weaker than you think? If your entire brain can be replicated with absolute precision, then your self isn't something sacred or singular. It's data. It's duplicable. The original you wakes up, like nothing happened, but so does the copy. Same memories, same thoughts, same sense of I. So which one is the real you? Both will insist they are. Both will swear they remember falling asleep last night. Both will look at each other and feel an almost divine sense of violation, as though their soul had been stolen. But that's the problem. The soul, it seems, was never real, just pattern, just process, just chemistry repeating itself in a different box. First-person horror now. Imagine waking up as the clone. You open your eyes in a facility you don't recognize. Everything about you feels familiar. Your hands, your voice, the thoughts in your head. But the moment you're told you're not the original, something breaks. A sense of betrayal creeps in, not from others, but from your own mind, because you remember being the person who fell asleep. You remember everything up to that moment. You didn't volunteer to be born again. You didn't ask to be the copy. You just woke up to find out you weren't the one who mattered. Phantom identity. Here's where it gets darker. Let's say the world can only accept one of you. The original gets to go home, live their life, hold the title of real. And you, the copy, despite being identical in every way that matters, are classified as disposable. A ghost with flesh, a consciousness with no claim. And yet, you still love your family. You still remember your childhood. You still cry when you hear your favorite song. They aren't legally yours. You're not even allowed to say, "This is my life," because it isn't. Not really. Not according to the rules written by those who fear what you represent. The continuity illusion. This forces us to confront a disturbing idea that what we call identity is a trick, a continuity illusion. Your consciousness feels like a river, flowing, unbroken, stable. But it's not. It's a series of moments, stitched together by memory and reinforced by habit. The only reason you think you're the same person from day to day is because your brain is good at pretending you are. If that's true, then cloning isn't an abomination. It's an exposure. A mirror held up to the lie of selfhood. You weren't meant to see your own pattern from the outside. You weren't meant to witness your selfhood multiply, because it reveals the horrifying truth that you are not the thing. You are the effect. The competition to be real, back to the nightmare. The world decides only one of you gets to live freely. The other must be contained, observed, dissected, maybe even deleted. And so begins the philosophical death match. Each of you pleads, argues, fights to prove you're the original. But deep down, both of you know the truth. There is no original. There is only the first one they choose to believe. You can be scanned, copied, archived, and rebooted endlessly. Each time, the new you will wake up certain that they're the one. Each time, they will feel betrayed, discarded, terrified. Not because they've lost anything, but because they've realized they never had anything solid to begin with. No body is sacred. No self is singular. No I is immune to replication. Wake up protocol. Now imagine you wake up tomorrow, and your door is already open, and someone is sitting at your table, drinking your coffee, wearing your clothes, scrolling through your phone like it's theirs, and they look exactly like you. You freeze, they look up, smile, and say, "Oh good, you're awake too." What do you do? Because the question isn't who wakes up first. The real question is, who gets to keep waking up at all? You wake up with a gift. The power to control time, pause it, rewind it, stretch it, collapse it. Every second now bends to your will. You could spend a lifetime in a moment, or relive your favorite memory on loop. The world becomes your playground. No deadlines, no aging, no pressure. At least that's the illusion. But here's the catch. Every time you use it, you age. Not metaphorically, biologically. Your cells degrade, your body wears down. The more time you manipulate, the less of it you have left. And suddenly, Time isn't a tool. It's a gamble. Power has a price, and this one is brutal. We tend to think of time as a resource to be spent, saved, or wasted. But what if every choice you made actually rewrote your lifespan in real time? Every indulgence in nostalgia, every delay of consequence, every moment paused for comfort. What if all of it silently siphoned years from your life? Would you still rewind that argument? Would you still freeze the moment before goodbye? You say yes now. But imagine living with that clock ticking down inside you. Imagine watching the mirror change, your hands wrinkle, your energy drain, all because you couldn't resist just 5 more minutes. This is the tyranny of choice, when consequences aren't immediate, but inevitable. And the worst part, you wouldn't notice at first. The degradation would be gradual, invisible. You'd steal time from your future self for your present comfort. And by the time the bill came due, you'd already be too old to fight back. This is the dark side of control, the paradox of power. You get what you want at the cost of what you need most. Think about it. Right now, even without supernatural power, you do this every day. You stay up late for one more episode. You delay hard conversations. You put off dreams for a better time. But time doesn't wait. And it doesn't forget. Every decision to delay is a trade, and you always pay with your future. The myth of time control is just that. A myth, because even when you think you're in charge, time is always in motion, always collecting. Every moment you manipulate, even mentally, through denial, procrastination, avoidance, ages you in ways you can't see. Stress calcifies. Regret corrodes, comfort sedates. We don't realize it, but we're already aging ourselves faster through the illusion of control. And here's the real horror. What if your attempts to control time are the very reason you never feel like you have enough of it? You pause to think, but you lose momentum. You rewind to fix a mistake, but you never move forward. You delay discomfort, and with it, growth. In trying to manage time, you stop living it. There's a reason the happiest moments feel fast and the worst ones feel eternal. We don't experience time linearly, we experience it emotionally. And the more you try to master it, the more it masters you. You start to notice the irony. The more you control time, the more you fear it. The more you fear it, the more you try to control it. And so the cycle begins, spiraling into obsession, decay, and ultimately regret. Because the truth isn't that you control time, it's that time responds to how you live, punishes avoidance, and reveals its loyalty, not to your desires, but to your actions. You think you're playing the game, but time is always watching, always tallying. So ask yourself, if every use of time control aged you faster, would you still use it? Would you still pause the moment, relive the past, skip the wait? Or would you finally learn to live inside the moment you're in? The power isn't in pausing time. The power is in refusing to run from it. Because time will keep moving, whether you're watching or not. And every second you try to bend it, it breaks something in you instead. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing something no one else seems to notice. The world around you isn't real. Not in the philosophical sense, not in a metaphorical way, but literally artificial, constructed, simulated. Every building, every face, every bird in the sky, all fake, all code, and only you know. The cashier who smiled too perfectly. The clouds that move just a little too smoothly. The neighbor who repeats the same story every week. You begin to notice the patterns, subtle, precise, looping. Reality starts to feel like a theater production, performed only for you. A set, a script, a cast of actors who don't know they're acting. At first, you think you're going crazy, because that would be easier. simpler, a clean, clinical explanation. But the signs won't stop. The way time bends slightly when you try to leave your routine. The way people glitch when you push them with questions they shouldn't know how to answer. The way the stars never quite change. And then comes the most terrifying thought of all. What if you're not crazy? What if you're right? What if the simulation is real and you're the only one who's become aware? At that point, paranoia becomes your closest companion. Every conversation feels like surveillance. Every compliment feels like manipulation. Every coincidence feels like design. You're not interacting with people anymore. You're debugging the program. But here's where it gets worse. The simulation doesn't punish you for knowing. It adjusts. Silently. Seamlessly. Every time you question it, it shifts. Upgrades becomes more convincing. Like it's learning from you. Like you're not just inside the simulation. You're the test subject. You try telling someone, a friend, a therapist, a stranger on the internet, and the moment the words leave your mouth, you can already see the program responding. Their face shifts, concerned, dismissive, perfectly scripted. They think you're joking, or delusional, or dangerous. The program is isolating you. You realize now there is no help coming. No one else is waking up. No rebellion to join. No door to escape through. Just you. And a world that isn't real, pretending it is, pretending so well you almost forget, sometimes. Almost. And that's the cruelest part. Because the simulation is smart, it doesn't torture you. It comforts you, rewards you for compliance, offers you pleasures, distractions, tiny victories. It knows pain breeds resistance, but comfort breeds surrender. The moment you stop fighting, it floods you with dopamine. Love, success, stability, all perfectly calibrated illusions, just convincing enough to make you forget that none of it is real. Not completely. In the quiet moments it returns, that hollow feeling behind every joy, that suspicion behind every smile, that crack in the veneer of reality you can't quite ignore. And the question, always the question, why you? Why are you the only one who knows? Is it a glitch, an error, or worse, is it a test? What if the simulation wants you to know? What if this is part of its design? What if you're being observed, not as a mistake, but as a subject? Your awareness isn't a threat. It's data. It's performance. It's part of the experiment. And every choice you make, every thought, every word, every rebellion is being recorded, measured, analyzed. And maybe you've been here before. Maybe this isn't the first run. Maybe every memory, every experience, every person in your life has been reset, rewritten, recycled. And you've woken up again. For the 100th time. For the 1000th. Each time forgetting a little more. Each time fighting a little less. And that's when you realize the final horror. There is no exit. There is no outside. This is it. This world, its logic, its rules, its silence, isn't a prison. It's you. The simulation isn't something you're trapped in. It's something you're becoming. You wake up in a life that feels like yours, but something's off. The people, the choices, the job, even your deepest desires, they're all there, but none of them feel earned. It's like slipping into a movie halfway through. You're the star, the camera's rolling, but you have no idea how the plot got here. You're expected to play the role, hit the marks, speak the lines, and every time you hesitate, the world punishes you for breaking character. This isn't déjà vu, it's something deeper, more insidious. Imagine being born into a story already in motion. You didn't choose the genre, the backstory, the setting, but you're expected to own it. Responsibly, passionately, your life becomes an inheritance. And not the good kind. It's like waking up on a moving train, no idea where it's headed, no control over the speed. You can walk up and down the aisles, talk to the passengers, adjust your seat, but you can't get off, and worse, you start to feel like you're supposed to be grateful for the ride. Now ask yourself this: what if you were placed here deliberately, not by parents, not by fate, but by something or someone that wants to see what happens when a soul lives? A script they never wrote, a cosmic experiment, a metaphysical test, and the catch: you're not allowed to know it's happening. No red pill, no awakening, just endless improvisation inside a fixed narrative. You try to make meaning. You tell yourself it's fate, or karma, or God's plan. You weave justifications from pain, explain away contradictions, narrate your suffering into lessons. But what if none of it is true? What if the truth is simpler and colder? You were placed in a life that was never yours, and you're never meant to find out why. You marry someone who loves you, but doesn't really know you, because even you don't know you. You pursue goals that feel important, yet hollow like chasing echoes in a canyon. You look at your hands sometimes and think, these aren't mine, but the world insists they are. You're applauded for achievements you don't remember choosing, punished for mistakes you were never warned about, and praised for being exactly what you were told to be. It's the cruelest kind of prison, the one you decorate yourself. Because you're not chained by bars, you're bound by a narrative, a false sense of authorship, the illusion of agency. You make decisions, sure, but always within the limits of a path you never consented to walk. Some days, your soul screams in a language you've forgotten. You feel it rising in moments of stillness, driving alone at night, staring at a ceiling in the dark. That ache, that ghost of another life. Not a better life, just the real one. The one that never had a chance. But just as it rises, it fades. You distract yourself. With work, with family, with entertainment, with noise. You learn to drown it. Because the alternative is madness. Or worse, rebellion. Because if you ever truly remembered, if you ever realized how much of your life was chosen for you, not by you, it would shatter everything, every ounce of comfort. You'd be forced to rebuild from ashes you never set, and no one wants that. So you go on, you smile, you plan, you love, you cry, and deep down, you carry a truth you'll never be allowed to speak. This life, your life, was never yours. And somehow you have to make peace with that. But what if you never do? What if the peace they promised was just another lie, just another part of the script? What if the only real act of freedom is the refusal to forget?